Chapter 411. What suggestions does Wan have? Li Hongyuan calmly asked. Jingwan raised her head to look at him, rather puzzled. What do you need me to suggest? The things made by the imperial kitchen must be excellent. It's just that, this husband heard that Wan is very good at eating antique soup, with a variety of flavors. Why, don't you want to make it for this husband to try? Li Hongyuan was sad. Jingwan was a member of the foodie nation in her previous life, so things like hot pot naturally didn't need to be mentioned. Although it was said that hot pot was more concentrated in some places, but in fact, it was available all over the country. The ways and types of eating were naturally varied, and it really wasn't something that the antique soup of today could compare to. Eating hot pot in the winter was indeed good, and in ancient times, there was no need to worry about this and that. Occasionally eating it would be very satisfying. Although Jingwan hadn't eaten it in Jin Wangfu yet, but there would definitely be. It was something that would happen sooner or later. Where did Wang Ye hear this from? Where did Wan think you heard it from? I thought that there were some things that Wan should have known earlier. Li Hongyuan's expression was faint. He seemed to be even sadder that his wife was so incomprehensible. The super handsome man's bright and beautiful sadness at 45 degrees was absolutely lethal. However, Jingwan, who was more adaptable now, just wanted to slap his face. From the interactions after marriage, a certain someone deliberately tried to understand her preferences and other aspects before marriage. In the current context, this kind of thing was generally the woman's patent, especially when a woman married into a higher position. Therefore, when Jingwan initially realized what Li Hongyuan did, she was a bit flattered. Of course, because of his behavior before marriage, Jingwan was not particularly surprised. But now, purely speaking, Jingwan was a bit embarrassed into anger. Mu Gonggong stood at the side, quietly waiting for Wang Fei's orders. At the same time, his eyes and ears were alert, constantly watching his Wang Ye and Wang Fei, but he absolutely couldn't make it obvious and affect the two people. In this way, if they had any orders, he would be the first to know. It should be known that as a qualified henchman, he had to make his master feel considerate, and at the same time, he had to be able to seal off his six senses at the right time. What he didn't dare to listen to, what he shouldn't look at, was absolutely a skill that required long-term training. And Mu Gonggong had now practiced it to perfection. Jingwan just moved her hand slightly, and Mu Gonggong immediately stepped forward. Since the King of Hell wanted to eat the antique soup, Jingwan, in the name of the King of Hell, began to order dishes without hesitation, including all kinds of meat, vegetables, bean products, mushrooms, eggs, and so on. She could have added seafood, but in the north, seafood was not fresh, only dried fish. In addition, there were requirements for the processing of some things, such as beef. Ordinary people couldn't eat it easily, and it was even illegal to slaughter cattle privately. However, it was not a big deal for the royal family to eat it, not to mention the plate presentation. According to Jingwan, she wanted to make the antique soup, which was not so good in the eyes of the people of Qiyuan, high-end and classy. Jingwan had so many requirements, and Mu Gonggong remembered them all in his mind. Therefore, a good memory was also one of the necessary skills for an excellent henchman. Just as Mu Gonggong was about to leave, he was stopped by Gong Mama, but she was talking to Jingwan. Princess, there are 2 or 3 ingredients in the soup just now. Although it's not a big deal, it's better not to eat them together. Jingwan thought for a while. How should she put it? In fact, Nanny Gong had told her about this from time to time in the past few years. But obviously, she still hadn't learned everything. Nanny, why don't you go with Movin? If there's something good, we can ask the Imperial Kitchen to prepare some more. If it's not good enough, we won't take it. Yes. Gong Mama answered. The things in the palace were not good. Jingwan had the confidence to say these words after marrying into Jin Qin Wang Fu. Mu Gonggong was a little unhappy about being robbed of his job. However, she was the princess's most capable mama, so he didn't dare to show any emotion. He just secretly decided that after he went back, he must find time to learn another skill. Not to mention learning pharmacology, at least in terms of food, he must not be robbed halfway when he was working for the princess. Gong Momo glanced at Mu Gonggong. To be honest, after she went to serve Jingwan, she was also by the side of the living king of hell. Naturally, she also had some dealings with this Jin Qin Wang Fu's steward. Gong Momo felt that this person sometimes had a problem. In his mind, other than thinking of pleasing his master, he didn't think of anything else. However, Mu An was absolutely loyal, and he would never be careless about the things he should do. Therefore, Gong Mama naturally didn't bother to pay attention to him. The chief steward of the imperial kitchen was quite familiar with Mu Gonggong. When Prince Jin hadn't left the palace yet, he dealt with him almost every day. In the past few years, he basically hadn't seen him. However, the shadow left in his heart was so strong that it couldn't be erased in a lifetime. Of course, the real culprit was actually Li Hongyuan. Therefore, it could be imagined that before Li Hongyuan left the palace, he was a complete devil incarnate, Gui Jian Chou. At this moment, seeing Mu Gonggong, the chief steward of the imperial kitchen's heart jumped, but he put on a smile on his face and spoke and acted cautiously. Greetings to Gonggong. What can I do for you? He glanced at Gong Mama, who looked quite serious and upright. My eyes are bad. Who is this? Our princess's maid. Don't talk too much. Our Wang Ye wants to eat antique soup, quickly prepare it. The chief steward of the imperial kitchen had no place to express the bitterness in his heart. Now, Prince Jin's illustrious reputation had reached a higher level. Before he left the palace and was bestowed the title of prince, the chief steward of the imperial kitchen usually looked a bit dignified. But in front of those noble lords, he was nothing. In front of Li Hongyuan, he was like a quail. Not to mention now, let alone eating antique soup, even if he wanted to eat a bear's heart and leopard's gall, he had to find a way to immediately prepare it. Therefore, no matter how bitter it was, nimble actions were the way of the king. No problem. A lot of pots have been prepared since the beginning of winter. This one will immediately have someone take them out. It's just, what kind of side dishes does Gonggong need? Let's go to the storeroom, I want to take a look. Gong Mama timely opened her mouth and then asked for the bottom of the pot. Yes, yes, yes. You too, please follow this one. On one hand, she led the way, and on the other hand, she called more than a dozen palace maids and eunuchs to follow along so that it would be convenient to take things later. The imperial kitchen's inventory was naturally quite rich. It could be said that there was everything that one could think of. It was divided into categories, whether it was dry or fresh, whether it was meat or vegetables, whether it was semi-finished products or finished products. However, it was winter, so the amount of fresh vegetables would certainly not be much. At this time, it had completely become Gong Mama's home ground. While walking, she ordered how much she wanted, how to handle it, everything was concisely explained. From time to time, she would personally check the ingredients, whether they were satisfied or dissatisfied. Mu Gonggong completely became a foil, just like a small attendant, aggrieved by the side. However, he was not completely brooding. It should be known that now was a good opportunity to secretly learn. The banquet was long enough, but Gong Mama did not want to let Wang Ya and Wang Fei wait too long. Therefore, her actions were very fast. Because her eyes were sharp enough, there was no situation where she would order something bad. After this round, she was basically done. The things that she ordered earlier were simple and easy to make and were all prepared. Gong Mama washed her hands carefully and checked them again. Those that were not up to standard were all sent back. Then, she took the ingredients and came back again. In this way, whether it was the chief steward or the junior stewards under him, they did not dare to ask the palace maids and eunuchs to do it. They all did it themselves. When everything was done and Gong Mama was satisfied, it took about half an hour. This was already a very fast speed, but Gong Mama still disliked it. As a result, the people in the imperial kitchen were a little stiff, for fear that they would annoy her. In fact, the imperial kitchen was the same as the imperial physician. They were both high-risk occupations. However, although Gong Mama was a little strict, she was not a person who deliberately found fault to prove her superiority. Okay, send it to Qianshan. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. There were more than a dozen people, and each person carried 1, 2, or 4 dishes, depending on the size of the plate. When Mu Gonggong saw the 2 copper pots, he frowned. Who asked me to prepare 2 pots? I only want 1. On the same table, eating separately from Wang Fei. If he really took it back like this, even if Master didn't peel off his skin, he would definitely not have a good look. If he made this kind of small mistake twice, he could go back to the furnace and start anew. The people in the imperial kitchen looked at each other in dismay. However, since the people around Jin Qin Wang said so, it was definitely right to do it. After all, if there was a mistake, these 2 people had to be together. They removed 1 pot and quickly sent it over. Mu Gonggong quickly followed, but Gong Mama lagged behind a little. She waited until all the things were taken away before she followed. Inadvertently, she glanced back and saw that not far away, a chicken was being cooked. Looking at it, it should be a consort who wanted it. If it was cooked now, it would be just right to drink it when the banquet was over. Gong Mama did not pay much attention to it and directly left the imperial kitchen. Although all the imperial kitchen did not go through the main door, there were so many people. Moreover, at this time, the dishes had not been served, so it was not too obvious. All the original dishes on the table were removed. The copper pot was placed at a place not far from the 2 people. Various side dishes were placed in a circle around it. As there was not enough space, another table was added. It was a dazzling array of things. The plate arrangement was also quite exquisite. Although it was regarded as something not very presentable, in Jingwan's view, it was still quite good. It was just that she did not notice it when she ordered it. Now that it was on the table, wasn't it a bit too much? Moreover, more than half of it was added by Gong Mama. However, Jingwan then thought that it seemed that the one sitting at the head of the table had breakfast. There were various kinds of snacks: rice, porridge, pickled vegetables, fat chicken with mushrooms, 3 fresh duck, 5 pieces of chicken, shredded chicken, stewed meat, stewed tripe with persimmon, stewed meat with cabbage, braised mutton with spinach and tofu, stewed donkey with cabbage, sliced lamb with Sichuan radish, duck strips with sea cucumber, duck diced with gusien rice, roasted ibaraki mushrooms, stewed pork slices with pork slices, fried spring rolls, fried pork with chives, smoked pork belly, braised tofu, smoked shredded vegetables, stir-fried shredded cabbage with pepper oil, dried 5 spices, sacrificial meat slices, soup, boiled celery, cooked white meat, and so on. According to the season, there would be various changes. Tofu and other things were not so wasteful. But chicken, duck, and fish were not so wasteful. Because often only a small part was taken, such as duck tongue and grouper cheek meat, to make a plate. How many ducks and fish would it take? Speaking of which, Emperor Luqingdi was a relatively frugal emperor. However, he had at least 30 to 40 dishes for every meal. As long as people were invited to eat or on more formal occasions, it was normal to have more than 100 dishes. For example, today, there were more than a dozen dishes on the table, but they were changed at least 4 times. It could be imagined how many things were wasted. And there were not many people who could eat these things. Most of them were flashy but not practical, expensive but not beneficial, and tasteless. To put it bluntly, there was really no practical use except for putting on a show. Every time she encountered such a banquet, Jingwan could not help but complain in her heart. It was not that she was petty, but it was really too wasteful. Moreover, who would dare to say that the things wasted were not good? Many people wanted to eat them, but they could not even smell the smell. The people in the palace were divided into different ranks. Don't think that others would use the leftovers after the higher-ups used it. That was a dream. After experiencing so much, she couldn't help but be calm. In comparison, there weren't many side dishes. Moreover, Jingwan truly felt that this antique soup was actually a more frugal way of eating. The fish was sliced whole, and the vegetables weren't just the core. Saying that it wasn't classy was definitely a rumor. In the history of her previous life, in a certain dynasty, during the winter, the emperor would basically serve a table of hot pot every day. On a certain birthday, he even used hot pot to hold a banquet for more than 5,000 people. How could this not be classy? In the palace banquet in winter, everyone ate more hot pot and let the living king of hell blow the wind for his father. Even Emperor Luqingdi said it was good. How could the subordinates dare to say no? When Emperor Luqingdi was gone, there was still the living king of hell. As the saying goes, subordinates follow the example of superiors. Even if it was not good, it had to be good. In a day, their table had become the focus of attention many times, so they did not feel anything when they were surrounded again. Jingwan calmly began to cook the food with her own hands. Naturally, she did not forget a certain someone who was waiting to eat at the side. A certain someone was a carnivore. In the prince's mansion, Jingwan also forced him to eat a lot of vegetables. Tonight, she would satisfy him and let him eat more meat. Speaking of which, unless one really did not like hot pot, eating hot pot was definitely the time when one ate vegetables the most. Being served by his wife, Li Hongyuan naturally did not refuse. After all, he practiced martial arts all year round, so when he ate freely, his appetite was definitely not small. Perhaps Li Hongyuan's appetite was really good. At least, Luqingdi had never seen him eat so much. In the past, when he occasionally ate with his father, the number of times he stretched out his chopsticks was limited. Luqingdi really did not notice the things about other sons in this aspect. The son he cared about the most had a more obvious change, so he had to pay attention. Old 6, do you like antique soup? Li Hongyuan slowly put the slices of meat on his chopsticks into his mouth, chewing carefully and swallowing slowly. Then, he gave Luqingdi a look. At least it feels good now. He was just giving face to his wife. Whether or not his son liked it after this meal, Luqingdi was very happy now. Come, ask the imperial kitchen to prepare a portion for me. Following the example, the imperial kitchen was naturally very fast this time. The other dishes in front of Luqingdi were all removed. Luqingdi naturally did not need to do it himself. There was a sea of people who were willing to serve him. If possible, those concubines would roll up their sleeves themselves. Luqingdi excitedly picked up the slices of meat that the servant put in the bowl after the rinsing. Well, it did not taste good, but he still swallowed it. However, Shi Xian glanced at her son faintly, wondering in her heart, well, what is it? When my son used to eat with me, he did not eat much because of his unique taste. To continue eating or not to eat, this was the problem. But since it was already served, if he did not eat, would it embarrass her son? Many people noticed Luqingdi's subtle expression. Many people who were ready to eat gave up. No matter whether they thought it was good or not, if the emperor did not think it was good, they could not eat it. Li Hongyuan remained indifferent and continued to eat at a leisurely pace. Jingwan looked at Luqingdi and said with a smile, "Father, the heat is very important when eating antique soup. Why don't you ask an imperial chef to cook it? Their control of the heat is unparalleled. The food they cook will definitely taste the best. Luchingdi showed an expression of sudden realization. I was wondering why the taste of the meat was a bit strange. I thought it was because of the different cooking methods. So it was because of this. Son of a bitch, you don't know how to show off. Why don't you ask the imperial chef to cook it? It was the son of a bitch's fault that he almost embarrassed his son. The chamberlain hurriedly apologized and felt a chill in his heart. This matter could be considered small or big. It completely depended on what Luchingdi thought. It would not flare up now, but in the future, the consequences were simply unimaginable. Although the people in the imperial kitchen served the masters of the entire palace, what they cared about the most was the honor of the emperor. Just a word of praise and they would be rewarded greatly. When they reached a certain age, they would be able to leave the palace. With these rewards, they would be able to live the rest of their lives in luxury. If they opened a restaurant or worked for some other high official or noble, and took in a satisfactory disciple, everything would be perfect. Of course, the premise was that they did not encounter any shady affairs in the palace. If they did, it was very likely that they would lose their heads. There were very few opportunities to serve in front of the emperor, even as the head steward of the imperial kitchen. Therefore, he was both excited and nervous when he got such an opportunity. If he served the emperor well, there would be benefits, but if he didn't, he might be punished. None of the people present were people that a little chef like him could afford to offend. Therefore, he naturally had to do his own thing honestly. Although at this time, it was actually very easy to take advantage of others. However, those who had a little bit of brains would not easily appear. After the person serving him changed, Luchingdi tasted it again. Well, the taste was really good. Luchingdi expressed that he also liked the food that his son liked to eat and ate happily. No matter what the reason was, some of the concubines and some princes also asked for a share. Then, Luchingdi waved his hand and all the envoys and courtiers from other countries also got a share. Anyway, none of them occupied 2 tables. It was already good enough if there were more than 5 people at a table for 10 people. That's right, no matter how many people there were, each table had a portion. Everyone had a portion, haha. Therefore, when it came to following the trend, the imperial palace was the most popular and the fastest. If the superior said it was good, then it would be good even if it was not good. Hot pot was something that could be cooked and eaten immediately. After a long time, one would be covered in sweat. Needless to say, it was very satisfying. As for those who disliked the strong smell or felt uncomfortable sweating, there was no need to bother about it. Therefore, what was supposed to be a banquet filled with toasts became eating and eating. Luchingdi was also delighted. His previous displeasure seemed to have been thrown out of his mind. Even when facing Wei Xianfei, he was quite happy. Time passed bit by bit. The bright lights and the harmonious atmosphere made the palace banquet seem to have a touch of humanity. However, Your Highness Imperial Concubine Shu, a scream instantly broke the joyous atmosphere. Everyone looked over in an instant. Qin Shu Fei's face was pale and she had fainted. The table in front of her was covered in blood. It was obvious that she first vomited blood and then fainted. The whole process was very fast. Luchingdi stood up and rushed forward. He took Qin Shu Fei from the hands of a palace maid. Seeing her appearance, he was shocked and angry. Call the imperial physician. In order to prevent accidents, the imperial physician was on standby at all times. Therefore, he came very quickly. The imperial physician hurriedly took her pulse. His heart was beating fast and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. He did not dare to jump to a conclusion and carefully looked at her. Your Majesty, what's the matter? speak quickly. Lu Qingdi would not allow him to hesitate. Your Majesty, Imperial concubine Shu is showing signs of being poisoned. The Imperial physician trembled and said. Poisoned. Lu Qingdi's voice rose. Whether it was his tone or his expression, it was very frightening. Everyone present was shocked, and their hearts couldn't help but beat faster. How could someone suddenly be poisoned at the birthday banquet? No one would think that it was an accident. It was 100% man-made. But who was so bold to poison her at this time? And Qin Shu Fei, was someone else's target, or did she unintentionally become an unlucky scapegoat? What are you waiting for? Quickly think of a way to cure Imperial concubine Shu. Your Majesty, to cure her, we must first know what poison Imperial concubine Shu was poisoned with. More and more cold sweat appeared on his forehead, but he did not dare to wipe it away. Lu Qingdi turned his head and stared at the people beside Qin Shu Fei like a malicious ghost. What did your master eat just now? The person who had been serving Qin Shu Fei and tasting her food, as well as the person from the Imperial kitchen, quickly knelt down. Your Majesty, Imperial concubine drank 2 mouthfuls of chicken soup just now. The half bowl of chicken soup was still on the table. The oil on the surface had been wiped clean. The chicken soup looked relatively clear. Perhaps Qin Shu Fei was not so close when she first acted up. Looking at the position of the bowl, she seemed to have deliberately pushed it further away. It was not knocked over. Perhaps she had already realized that there was something wrong with the chicken soup. When the Imperial physician heard this, he hurriedly went forward to check. However, the results were unexpected. There was no problem with the soup, and the spoon used to drink it was also fine. After coming to this conclusion, the palace maid in charge of tasting the food also said, Your Majesty, this servant has tasted Imperial concubine soup. She was perfectly fine, so it was definitely not a problem with the chicken soup. Immediately check all of these things, including the dishes that were removed from the table. Yes. The Imperial physician responded and did not dare to be negligent. He checked the dishes one by one. The truth was that the antique soup base and the food that Qin Shu Fei had eaten were all fine. As for the dishes that had been removed from the banquet, other than the last round, the previous ones had been taken care of. The leftover dishes of the masters would be secretly shared by the servants. This was a well-known consensus. The food that the nobles were not willing to eat was something that the palace servants could not get even if they begged for it. The leftover ingredients were all in the imperial kitchen, so they did not dare to touch them. However, the cooked food was different. They quickly stuffed it into their mouths, swallowed it, and wiped their mouths with a swipe of their mouths, regardless of whether those people ate secretly or openly, they were all fine. Up until now, the only one who was in trouble was Qin Shu Fei. Of course, it could not be ruled out that someone had already gotten rid of the poisoned food. Was there any poison that could be induced by the chicken soup that could not be detected under normal circumstances? Someone raised this question. Obviously, there was no such thing. They could not find the source of the poison and did not know what kind of poison it was. The imperial physician was also helpless. He could only do his best to prevent the poison from entering the lungs. Lu Qingdi's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He sent Qin Shu Fei back to Sweet Dew Palace and ordered that the things in Thousand Years Hall were not to be touched. The people of Thousand Years Hall were not to enter or leave for the time being. The commander of the Imperial Guards would investigate this matter. Some people were terrified. Naturally, there were also people who were indifferent. It was just that, basically, no one ate anymore. Who knew if there were any problems in these things? Qin Shu Fei worked for Jin Qin Wang and her temperament was very good. Many people in the palace liked her. Standing in Jingwan's position, she also did not want anything to happen to Qin Shu Fei. It was just that this matter revealed a lot of strangeness. Everything was fine, then. Jingwan's heart suddenly moved. Wang Ye, is it possible that Shu Fei Nyang had been poisoned long ago? When the poison flared up, could it be that it was not a simple chicken soup, but some kind of medicine that was placed in the chicken soup? Compared to other people, Li Hongyuan acted as if nothing had happened and continued to leisurely drink wine. That appearance, even Jingwan felt that he was asking for a beating. Wang Ye, Li Hongyuan's line of sight fell on Jingwan's face. Wang Fei's guess is not impossible. Ask the Imperial Kitchen about Shu Fei Nyang's diet and we will know. Although there was such a guess, in the end, this matter was not under their jurisdiction, so they let Mu Gonggang inform Yu Zhongqing. Originally, there were no clues, but this guess undoubtedly provided a direction. Therefore, Yu Zhongqing brought people to the Imperial Kitchen. Not long after they left, Lu Qingdi's personal chamberlain hurried over. Greetings to Wang Ye. Wang Ye, His Majesty's verbal order is for you to send people to invite your Fu's physician into the palace. The other imperial physicians, whether inside or outside the palace, had already been called. But Qin Shu Fei's current situation was not optimistic. Lu Qingdi thought of Gongzhou. Since he saved Kong Qinhuang's heir and also examined the empress, his medical skills were naturally excellent. Although there were specializations and people with good medical skills may not be proficient in poisons, but what if he could do it? As long as there was some hope, it was best not to give up and not to delay time. Therefore, Lu Qingdi was straightforward. Li Hongyuan certainly would not refuse this kind of thing and let Mu Gonggang leave the palace immediately. Wang Ye, His Majesty's meaning is for you and Wang Fei to go to the Sweet Dew Palace. Li Hongyuan's eyebrows and eyes were cold, without any expression, but Jingwan's face showed surprise. Obviously, she had some doubts about this. Even if one of his sons was to go, it should be the Gong Qinhuang. After all, on the surface, Qin Shu Fei could be considered to be standing behind the Gong Qinhuang. Let's go. Li Hongyuan obviously didn't care at all, and didn't think about whether there was any deeper meaning in this. Ben Wang will also go. They didn't deliberately lower their voices, so the people around them heard it. The Gong Qinhuang's request was reasonable. This. Lu Qingdi's chamberlain hesitated. After all, the emperor only called Jin Qinhuang. Although Ben Wang was not formally raised by Shu Fei, Ben Wang was basically raised in the Sweet Dew Palace before he was conferred the title of prince. Half an adopted son is not excessive. Now that Shu Fei's situation is unknown, Ben Wang wants to go and take a look. What's wrong with that? Even if Imperial Father knew, he would definitely agree. His words weren't radical, but it could be said that they were sincere. However, his expression didn't allow for any discussion. Obviously, even if this chamberlain didn't agree, he would still follow. The chamberlain saw that Jin Qinhuang had already walked away, and didn't care about them at all. He simply followed, ignoring the Gong Qinhuang, as if he didn't hear anything. The Gong Qinhuang's face was gloomy. That chamberlain was blatantly cutting ties with him. If he followed, he would be completely acting on his own initiative. However, he had already said that, if he didn't go, it would inevitably be seen as hypocritical. Therefore, he could only bite the bullet and follow, pulling his Wang Fei along. As Qin Shu Fei's niece, she was worried about her aunt, so if she went to take a look, no one would think that it was wrong. However, it was obvious that she was thinking too much. When they arrived at the Sweet Dew Palace, Lu Qingdi didn't appear at all. The Sweet Dew Palace servants were serving tea. The two Qinhuang and the two Wang Fei were sitting quietly. The atmosphere was too heavy. The Gong Qinhuang wanted to speak several times, but after opening her mouth, she had no choice but to close it. It wasn't until Yu Zhongqing came over and reported to Lu Qingdi that Lu Qingdi came out from the inner hall. His face showed obvious fatigue. Is there any progress? Yu Zhongqing recounted his conjecture based on Jin Qinhuang's conjecture, and then went to investigate the imperial kitchen. However, the results of the investigation were still disappointing. Qin Shu Fei's food had always been from the imperial kitchen. The Suite du Palace's small kitchen usually only made some snacks, and Qin Shu Fei would drink a bowl of chicken soup every day. This had been going on for several years, and the ingredients for the soup would only be changed once in a year or so. Moreover, they were all prescriptions written by the imperial doctor. Every prescription could be found from the imperial doctor. The current ingredients had already been used for 3 to 4 months, and there had been no problems. Among the concubines, those with a bit of status would have their pulse checked every once in a while. The higher their status, the shorter the interval. Other people might have their pulse checked regularly, but Qin Shu Fei's pulse was not fixed. Whoever was free would go, and there was no pattern. Qin Shu Fei's health had always been good, and there was nothing wrong with her. Every imperial doctor's result was similar. If there was a slow-acting poison in her body that no one could detect, it was basically impossible for it to exist. Therefore, this path was still not very clear. Such a result made Lu Qingdi angry and irritable. As the emperor, he was naturally suspicious. If he could not find the source of Qin Shu Fei's poisoning, Lu Qingdi would definitely suspect that the original target of the poisoning was him. Even if it was not him, would it be possible that he would be unknowingly poisoned in the future? If it was anyone else, they would definitely not tolerate this. Investigate, continue to investigate. Even if you have to turn the entire palace upside down, you must find out everything. Yes. Other than this word, Yu Zhongqing clearly had nothing else to say. He could only rejoice that Lu Qingdi was still rational and did not start a massacre out of anger. One had to know that there were too many people trembling in fear, especially the people in the imperial kitchen. They felt as if a knife was placed on their necks, and if the situation was slightly off, it would mercilessly fall. Gong Jiu entered the palace quickly. At this time, he did not care about any taboos. After seeing Lu Qingdi, he directly went to the inner hall. Gong Jiu's medical skills were very good. In fact, his poison skills were even better. He used silver needles to check Qin Shu Fei's condition. He took out 5 needles from Qin Shu Fei's body. After taking out the needles, he looked at them carefully and sniffed them. Not only that, he even used the tip of his tongue to lick the needles. The people around him, including Lu Qing Emperor, were all shocked. This was poison. Wasn't he afraid that he would also be poisoned? After inserting 5 needles, Gong Jiu repeated the same action 5 times. Your Majesty, the result is out. Lu Qingdi's face lit up. Really? How is the situation? Can it be cured? It can. Although it is a little troublesome, this commoner can ensure that concubine Shu Fei is fine. That's good, that's good. Lu Qingdi's eyebrows relaxed a little. When the Empress suddenly fell ill, he cared and was nervous because if the Empress died, things would be very troublesome. He did not have any feelings for the Empress. However, Qin Shu Fei was different. She was basically the opposite of the Empress. He did not like Qin Shu Fei, but Qin Shu Fei was a quiet and gentle woman. She could always calm him down under some negative emotions. Therefore, Qin Shu Fei was a relatively special existence to him. His heart calmed down a little. Since you know what poison it is, can you also find out how concubine Shu Fei was poisoned? Replying to your Majesty, this is not certain. This poison is a little strange. It can be used as the final medicine, but it is also a semi-finished product. This semi-finished product can be 2 or 3 different kinds. There are many variations, but the final result is the same. Once it is separated, it is basically impossible to find the poison. Hearing this, Lu Qingdi was a little discouraged. However, as long as the poison could be cured, it was not the worst result. How about this, you first stabilize concubine Shu Fei's condition, then go and check. Who knows, there might be unexpected results. Yes. Gong Jiu did not use any ready-made medicine to decipher the poison. He directly gave Qin Shu Fei acupuncture to control the poison. The whole process was very fast. It only took a few breaths of time. Looking at Gong Jiu's movements, it seemed that this was enough. Just like that. Lu Qingdi could not believe it. Replying to your majesty, as long as the silver needles are not used, concubine Shu Fei's condition can be guaranteed for 12 hours. Today is your majesty's birthday. It is said that the banquet is not over yet. This commoner thinks that we should first investigate the cause of concubine Shu Fei's poisoning so that we can explain it to the envoys of other countries. You are right. Come with me. After leaving the inner hall, Gong Jiu greeted Li Hongyuan, the real master, and hurriedly left. Li Hongyuan responded indifferently. Only then did Lu Qingdi realize that he hadn't told the person who would use his son. However, thinking about it, that was his son. Wasn't it natural for a father to use his son's person? Therefore, in an instant, he became self-righteous again. Li Hongyuan was too lazy to see what he was like. Speaking of which, this did not happen in his previous life. Therefore, Li Hongyuan also did not know what was going on. However, everything had a cause and effect. This matter could not be forgotten quietly. Li Hongyuan himself would not allow such a thing to happen. Gong Jiu first went to check the pot of chicken soup in the imperial kitchen. This time, Lu Qingdi even came in person. If he knew who was causing trouble inside, he would make sure that he died without a burial place. https://11/11807/8189879. Chapter 412. Gong Jiu's inspection naturally wasn't that simple. The soup was soup, but the chicken and all the other ingredients had to be separated one by one. Gong Jiu then divided the soup into 3 portions, and all the other ingredients were also divided into 3 portions. The chicken was even more fragmented. In Gong Jiu's hands, the bones were bones, and the meat was meat. Gong Jiu used several methods to inspect it, but there was nothing wrong with it. Even so, Gong Jiu didn't jump to conclusions. The results of the inspection didn't mean that there was nothing wrong with it. Perhaps he just didn't find anything wrong with it. In this aspect, it showed Gong Jiu's cautious attitude. Of course, in Jingwan's opinion, this kind of inspection was still very superficial. At most, it could only determine whether it was harmful or harmless. Using a few special things to inspect it according to the expected direction, she could clearly analyze the ingredients in her previous life. However, Gong Jiu's methods were much better than other people's. There's something wrong with this chicken. I saw it go into the pot. It's impossible for the chicken to be so fragmented in this period of time. Nanny Gong, who was beside Jingwan, suddenly spoke up. When everyone heard this, they all looked at her in unison. Nanny Gong crouched down. When this servant came to the imperial kitchen to prepare the antique soup for Prince and Princess, this servant accidentally saw this chicken being put into the pot. This servant originally thought that one of the imperial concubines was preparing to eat it after the banquet, but it turns out that Her Highness Consort Shu doesn't eat chicken soup that has been simmered for too long. According to the time, even if it had been simmered until now, it should be far more than this. Hearing Nanny Gong's words, the people in the imperial kitchen all nodded. Yes, yes. This chicken should have been raised for almost 2 years. It can't be that fragmented so quickly. Under normal circumstances, most people would overlook this situation. Although Gong Jiu was originally a hidden guard, he had never entered the kitchen. Even if he had carried out missions before, he would only personally roast some game. Basically, it would be eaten before it was cooked, so it was very normal that he didn't know. At this moment, Gong Jiu displayed unique Mu's learning spirit. He decided that when he returned, he would learn more about cooking in order to avoid making similar mistakes in the future. We can't find anything wrong with this chicken. Is there any more chicken in the Imperial kitchen? It's best if it's alive. Gong Jiu turned to ask the head steward of the Imperial kitchen. Yes, I'll get someone to bring them here right away. The biggest suspect for Qin Shu Fei being poisoned was the Imperial kitchen. At this time, they naturally hoped that they could get to the bottom of the matter as soon as possible. Because only by doing so would they have a chance to live. If they could live, no one would be willing to die for no reason. Only the 3 stewards had temporary freedom because they had to cooperate with the investigation. The others in the Imperial kitchen were detained by the Imperial Bell Army. Cut the crap. Hurry up and go. Lu Qingdi said coldly. The steward trembled and hurriedly left. He asked a few Imperial guards to help him catch the remaining chickens in the cages. There were still more than 10 of them. Gong Jiu used needles on each of the chickens and couldn't help but frown. These chickens were normal and looked very spirited. Under normal circumstances, if a living creature was fed with poison that could kill a person, there was no reason for the chickens to be alive. What about the chickens slaughtered in the same column? Are there any abnormalities? Now that he was asking about abnormalities, it was obvious that he was asking if there were any abnormalities. The steward of the Imperial kitchen hurriedly sent someone to check. Although a lot of chicken was used and the dishes used were different, the chicken heads and legs were all still there. Other than Qin Shu Fei, no one else wanted to stew a whole chicken. When Lu Qingdi found out that the chickens in the same column were actually served at the banquet, his heart grew colder and colder. He even suspected that he had taken a trip to the gates of hell. Before Gong Jiu could inspect the chicken heads, another steward of the Imperial kitchen noticed the problem with a trembling voice. Head steward, this chicken, there's an extra one. Everything that entered the Imperial palace had to be checked strictly. There was a limit to everything, and this live chicken was naturally the same. The result was basically certain that the extra one was the one with the problem. Because they were all pulled out of the chicken pen and slaughtered directly, there were a few people in charge of slaughtering the chickens. Moreover, some Imperial chefs disliked the young eunuchs for not handling it well and would do it themselves. As for the one given to Qin Shu Fei, it was slaughtered together with the other chickens. After all, it was cold and it was fine to leave it for a while. As such, unless someone in the Imperial kitchen knew that the chicken was different from the other chickens after it was slaughtered. However, there were so many people in the Imperial kitchen, including the senior and junior chefs. They dealt with ingredients every day and knew that they couldn't be careless in their work. They were very careful and sharp. If there was a slight difference, for the sake of insurance, regardless of whether there was a problem or not, it would be discarded. In this way, Qin Shu Fei's misfortune was greater. Then who was this chicken targeting? Or was it that no matter who it was, as long as someone fell, their goal would be achieved? Wouldn't it be better if it was Lu Qingdi who fell for it? Or was there a backup plan? The plan now was to find out the origin of the chicken. This matter was not within the scope of Gong Jiu's responsibility. When they were slaughtered, all the chickens were fine. Gong Jiu was still brooding over this point. No, there's only one possibility. That chicken was fed some kind of drug from the beginning. The dosage was very small, far from the extent that it would die after 1 or 2 doses. Then, bit by bit, over time, the chicken looked very healthy and alive, but in fact, it had already become a poisonous chicken. Jingwan thought of this possibility based on the drug resistance in her previous life. However, if it was a poison, it should be able to destroy the body faster and die faster. Was there a possibility that it developed a resistance? When Gong Jiu heard this, his eyes suddenly brightened. He clasped his hands in front of Jingwan. Princess consort is wise. This humble one is enlightened. Gong Jiu's sudden move really caught Jingwan off guard. She subconsciously moved away as she couldn't bear it. Li Hongyuan reached out to stop him in time. Jingwan couldn't avoid it. His wife was thin-skinned. Lu Qingdi also smiled in surprise. Lao Lu, she doesn't need to avoid it. Your Fu's doctor is right. There is nothing you can't bear. Jingwan didn't know how to respond to Lu Qingdi's words. She just lowered her head and pretended to be shy. If Princess Consort's guess is true, then the number of these chickens will not be many. Out of 100 chickens, it would be quite good to feed 1 or 2 intact chickens. What is fed would only be a semi-finished poison. For the finished poison, even if it was just a little bit at the tip of a needle, it would be impossible for the chicken to survive. According to Xu Fei Nyangnyang's situation, she was poisoned today. To be more precise, it was tonight. It's just that we don't know if the other half of the poison came from food or something else. Gong Jiu said. In other words, there will be no problem if one gets infected with only one of the two. At least it won't be as serious as Xu Fei Nyangnyang's. Jin Qinwang, who had been acting as the perfect background, finally opened his mouth. Yes, only one half. After 2 shichin, there won't be a problem if you get infected with the other half. It's not easy to raise poisonous chickens. It took 1 or 2 years of careful planning, and it was also successfully brought into the palace. Naturally, it wouldn't be wasted. If it was targeted at a certain person, there should be a flaw. If it was just to create trouble, it's uncertain if the poisonous chicken would enter a certain person's mouth. To achieve the goal, the other half of the poison is bound to be cast widely. The possibility of it being food is much higher than a certain item. When Li Hongyuan said this, Lu Qingdi's blood became half cold again. He even felt that he was a little uncomfortable and wondered if he was also poisoned. The latter is more difficult to investigate. The former is less feasible, but it's not absolutely impossible. In Ben Wang's opinion, the former is more likely. Regardless of whether Xu Fei Nyangnyang was the targeted person or not, she was poisoned, so she must have come into contact with the other half of the poison. After all, the palace maids had tasted the things that Xu Fei Nyangnyang ate in advance. Something happened to her, but the palace maids were fine. Either the other half of the poison did not come from food, or there is a problem with the palace maids. In addition, it's just to create trouble. It's basically useless against Fu Huang, the imperial concubines, and the princes. From Xu Fei Nyangnyang's reaction, it's a strong poison. The effect will be seen after eating it. In this way, the ones who are more likely to be poisoned are the court officials and the envoys of other countries. What's the purpose of creating trouble? The envoys of other countries, if there's no personal family interest involved, who would take such a big risk? Unless there are spies of the empire hiding in the palace. And deliberately plotting to murder the court officials at the palace banquet is even more unreasonable. It's easier to operate outside the palace than in the palace. Li Hongyuan said so much. It seemed like there were many possibilities, but in reality, some of them had prerequisites. As long as one of them was clear, the other possibilities could be eliminated. Xu Fei Nyangnyang's tasting maid has been interrogated. She was originally sent into the palace by the Marquis of Champion's residence. When she first entered the palace, she was 11 years old. Her relatives are all in the Marquis of Champion's residence. She has been in the palace for 5 or 6 years, so it's basically impossible for her to have received special training. The possibility of an ordinary girl lying under torture is very low. Therefore, there shouldn't be a problem. Yu Zhongqing said. Regardless of whether there's a problem or not, lock up all the people who should be locked up. Directly investigate the things that Xu Fei Nyang came into contact with tonight. Push back the time of the poisoning to 2 hours. If we can find the source of the other half of the poison, we don't have to do anything else. Li Hongyuan's face was clearly impatient. Originally, there were still activities after the banquet, which would last until midnight. There was no court meeting tomorrow, and the courtiers only needed to go to the yamen in the afternoon. The liveliness after the banquet was comparable to a few major festivals of the year. It should be filled with laughter under the brilliant lights, but it happened like this. The good mood was gone, and those who lacked interest were even more impatient. Lu Qingdi also knew that his son's patience was already at its limit. In reality, Lu Qingdi was also disgusted by tonight's events. More importantly, the fear of his life being threatened by an invisible threat. Although it didn't show on his face, in reality, he was more afraid of death than anyone else. He might as well go all the way and let the blackguard get involved in this matter. The blackguard getting involved in the palace wasn't a good thing. When the courtiers found out, Li Suyen had already brought people to intervene. Therefore, the courtiers simply shut up. The Empress was still in Qianqianhou. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan naturally returned. Until now, they still didn't understand why Lu Qingdi wanted them to go to Suite du Palace. Was it just to let them rest? And Prince Gongqin, who followed under the pretense of worrying about Qin Shufei, was the one who really played the role of a background character. At first, he was worried that Lu Qingdi would punish him. In the end, Lu Qingdi didn't even look at him from the beginning to the end. Comparing the two, which situation left him with a bigger psychological shadow? Compared to the others who were either uneasy, worried, or afraid, Li Hongyuan was particularly eye-catching. Xiao Jiu continued to drink and eat, as if she wasn't worried at all that she would follow in Qin Shufei's footsteps. In Jingwan's eyes, she felt that he was a little cold-blooded and cold-hearted. Even if he didn't have any feelings for Qin Shufei, he was still on your side. Was this really okay? Of course, Jingwan wouldn't have a problem with him because of this. If I was poisoned, what would Prince do? Li Hongyuan's wine was just about to reach his mouth. Hearing this, his hand paused. He looked at Jingwan and smiled faintly. Wan, don't say such things. People will die. Smile, it was still the smile that Jingwan was familiar with. However, Jingwan felt an unprecedented coldness. That kind of coldness that could freeze people from their flesh to their soul. That kind of fear made Jingwan feel as if she saw a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood behind him. This seemed to be the real living king of hell. Wan, are you afraid of me? Li Hongyuan was still smiling, but that smile was even more terrifying. Jingwan woke up with a start. She met Li Hongyuan's deep and bottomless eyes. She reached out and held Li Hongyuan's hand. I'm not afraid of you. I just don't like the feeling that you give people, Yuan. Li Hongyuan's smile didn't diminish, but that terrifying feeling disappeared. His eyes were dyed with real and touchable warmth. No matter what, this husband will never hurt you. However, Wan, there are some words that you shouldn't say in the future. This husband doesn't like to hear them. It will make me unhappy. If I'm unhappy, I don't know what I will do. Do you understand? Kill people. Jingwan inexplicably didn't avoid this question. Oh, yes, and definitely not just 1 or 2 people. That kind of scene, Wan would never want to see. Jingwan quietly looked at him for a moment, and then opened her mouth. Killing 1 is a sin, killing 10,000 is a hero. Killing 9 million is a hero among heroes. Heroes among heroes, the path is different. Seeing through the benevolence and righteousness of the past 100 years, and making a hero in this life. I don't love the good name, I don't love the bad name, I don't punish the heart for killing a million. I'd rather make the foreign race gnash their teeth in hatred. I don't teach no one to scold me. Li Hongyuan was slightly surprised. His wife's words were quite bold. However, Wan, you're secretly changing the concept. Your husband, I, am not that righteous. Perhaps he was a little bit in his previous life, but in this life, he was so narrow-minded that he only held up the sky for the people he cared about the most. No, I'm just telling you on my attitude. Because it's you, I can accept it. Of course, she couldn't cross the bottom line. Choosing between family and lover, unless there was something wrong with her brain, she wouldn't easily make a choice. But anyone who wanted two people to live together peacefully and happily, wouldn't be stupid enough to make such a choice. Li Hongyuan naturally wouldn't do such a thing. In fact, since Jingwan married Li Hongyuan, some of her moral bottom lines were being refreshed day by day, getting lower and lower. If it was before, if Li Hongyuan hurt the innocent, Jingwan would definitely not approve. Now, perhaps she still wouldn't approve, but she wouldn't have too many negative emotions. And those who were unfavorable to them, she probably wouldn't be lenient. The two people seemed to be intimate with each other, as if there was no one else around, forming a world of their own, excluding the rest of the people. That scene, how eye-catching. The Gong Prince couldn't get rid of the gloominess in his heart. He abruptly stood up and aggressively strode over to Li Hongyuan and the others. Imperial concubine Shu has been poisoned, she's unconscious, her life or death is unknown, yet old Six is whispering sweet nothings to his Wang Fei, smiling happily. What are his intentions? As an imperial daughter-in-law, you should be chaste and dignified. But Sixth sister-in-law is openly laughing and joking with her husband in public. Do you have any sense of shame? I'm afraid that even a lowly woman wouldn't do such a thing. Jingwan's face was ashen. She and her husband might be a little closer, but she still had a sense of propriety. But she was said to be so unbearable for no reason. Even a saint would be angry. The Gong Prince met Jingwan's angry gaze and sneered. What? Li Hongyuan threw his cup and stood up, grabbing the Gong Prince by the back of his neck and forcefully pushing him onto the table. The cups and plates on the table were knocked over and fell to the ground, making a series of crackling sounds. Li Hongyuan casually picked up a plate and smashed it down on the Gong Prince's head. The rest of the plate in his hand, with a flick of his wrist, brushed past the Gong Prince's neck and firmly stabbed into the table, leaving a line of blood. The Gong Prince cried out in pain, but Li Hongyuan stepped on his neck, making him immediately speechless. When Li Hongyuan stopped, the Gong Prince also recovered a little. But even so, he became more and more frightened. Forget about saying anything, this series of unforeseen events almost made his soul leave his body. Things happened too quickly, and the people around him didn't even have time to react. They just stood up subconsciously, as if they wanted to stop Li Hongyuan. When Li Hongyuan really stopped, everyone seemed to be frozen in place, and they hesitated to move forward. Li Hongyuan's face was expressionless. He retracted his foot and landed on the Gong Prince's back. His movements were neither fast nor slow, his bearing was not damaged at all. He turned to look at Jingwan and raised his chin. Jingwan stood up and took 2 steps back. Obviously, she didn't have the slightest intention of stopping Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan lifted his robe and put his other foot on the table. He crouched down and pressed the edge of the broken plate. The sharp edge of the broken plate was close to the Gong Prince's bloody neck. What did you say just now? This prince didn't hear it clearly, say it again. The Gong Prince raised his head, wanting to avoid the potentially fatal thing. He swallowed his saliva, ignoring the wound on his head and the blood flowing down his eyelids. Sixth brother, 4th brother was wrong, really wrong. It was only because I was worried about Imperial concubine Shu that I was agitated and impulsive that I did something wrong. Please forgive your brother this time, there won't be a next time, I promise. At this moment, the Gong Prince was so regretful that his intestines turned green. He even wanted to slap himself twice. He clearly knew what kind of character Li Hongyuan was. How could he act so impulsively and do such a stupid thing? He thought that with so many civil and military officials present, and so many foreign envoys present, he would restrain himself. Obviously, the Gong Prince still didn't understand. How did he suddenly provoke Li Hongyuan to this extent? Li Hongyuan didn't want to waste any more words with him. He stood up and stepped on the Gong Prince's back, crushing him with his foot, as if he wanted to trample him to death. The average person might not be able to do it, but he, who had truly experienced Li Hongyuan's strength, felt pain when he saw the Gong Prince like that. So many people didn't dare to step forward, and there were even imperial censors among them. It can only be said that no matter if you have iron teeth and copper teeth, no matter if you have a hard bone, you can only shrink back when you meet the King of Hell. After all, everyone has a weakness, and if there's a weakness, you can't escape from the King of Hell's palm. After all, there was once a court official who provoked the Jean Prince. For a long time, the entire family was in turmoil, and everyone was on the verge of collapse. The King of Hell was ruthless, he was poisonous, and he wasn't stingy. If you provoked him, then there really wasn't the slightest bit of reason. And those court officials who understood the Jean Prince's temperament very well, and were smart enough, were able to get along well with the Jean Prince. As long as you thought about it carefully, you could find that every time the Jean Prince got angry, it was basically someone else who provoked him first. And about his tyrannical behavior among the people, in fact, most of it was just a rumor, there was no evidence, and there was no credibility. The Gong Prince was the same this time. Originally, there was nothing wrong, but he insisted on stroking the tiger's whiskers. Now that things had turned out like this, it was absolutely his own fault. Seeing the Gong Prince's face in pain, blood even flowing out of his mouth, some people finally couldn't sit still. Prince, where it's possible to let people off, one should. Li Hongyuan swept a glance over, and that person's voice abruptly stopped, and he couldn't say another word. However, if the situation continued to go out of control, there was no guarantee that no one would die. When the Gong Prince fell to the ground, he was a prince who held real power. If he was killed by Li Hongyuan, no matter how much Luqing Emperor doted on him, it would be impossible to let him off lightly again. As a result, some of Li Hongyuan's brothers couldn't wait for Li Hongyuan to really kill the Gong Prince. Not to mention one less strong opponent, Li Hongyuan, this bastard who made them feel humiliated and afraid. Unrelated people might be able to stand by and watch, and they would also be afraid of Li Hongyuan's threat, but what about the people who were closely related to the Gong Prince? The Gong Qin princess consort was on the verge of collapse. The Gong Prince was now treating her worse and worse, but they were husband and wife. If the Gong Prince died, she wouldn't have a good life either. However, she couldn't even get close, Gong Mama standing in front of her. For the Gong Qin princess consort, it was a divine punishment. Gong Mama regarded Jingwan as an important person, but she was humiliated by the Gong Prince for no reason. Because she was a servant, she didn't show it on her face, but in her heart, she was exceptionally angry. She restrained herself from doing anything, but the Gong Prince didn't even think of getting half a step closer. The Gong princess shouted, scolded, pushed, but there was nothing she could do. Helpless, she turned to her father for help, but the Left Governor Qin Tianming just looked at her coldly. How do you want your father to help? Not to mention whether or not I can help, even if I say a word, the one who will suffer will be our family. Wang Feinyang, have you forgotten what happened at the Gong Prince's residence last year? You angered the Jean Prince, but your husband refused to bow his head and admit his wrongs. The ones who suffered were your brothers, and you even asked for your father's forgiveness. How long has it been, and you've already forgotten? He glanced at the Gong Prince. Heaven's evil can be forgiven, but self-inflicted evil can't be escaped. Qin Tianming didn't lower his voice, so everyone around heard him clearly. Obviously, this father-in-law of his believed that the Gong Prince brought this upon himself. The whole court knew that after that incident last year, Qin Tianming and the Gong Prince had become somewhat estranged, but they didn't expect it to be to this extent. It must be said that the Gong Prince's biggest reliance was his father-in-law, but now that he was pushed further and further away, it would be difficult for him to seize the throne. Of course, these were all tacit thoughts, no one would say it out loud. But the Gong Princess only felt a buzzing sound in her head. Another person who was on the verge of collapse was naturally the Gong Prince's biological mother. She stumbled over, but because of her status, she didn't dare to directly pull Li Hongyuan, but regardless of her status as a Shu mother, she directly knelt down, tearfully begging Li Hongyuan to be lenient. After all, she was Luqing Emperor's concubine, not everyone dared to accept her kneeling, so the people nearby naturally retreated. Unfortunately, Li Hongyuan didn't even spare her a glance. The Prince of Gong's birth mother was particularly helpless, crying her heart out. Ordinarily, she was also an extremely clever person, able to speak eloquently, able to come up with an idea with just a turn of her eyes, but at this moment, her mind seemed to be in a trance. She only knew to kneel and beg, as if there was no other way. Yuan, Imperial concubine Su slowly walked over. But Li Hongyuan still acted like he didn't hear. Imperial concubine Su's complexion wasn't very good. If it was before, she would have thought that Li Hongyuan didn't hear, but now she wasn't so sure. The Gong Prince's biological mother seemed to be grasping at a life-saving straw. Imperial concubine Nyang, Imperial concubine Nyang, please save Old Fourth. Save him, he was just confused for a moment, there's absolutely no other meaning, please save him, as long as you can save him once, this concubine is willing to be your ox or horse, please. Unlike Li Hongyuan, she grabbed Imperial concubine Su's sleeve without any psychological barrier. Imperial concubine Su frowned, tugging at her sleeve twice, but couldn't free it. Little sister, what are you saying? You and I are both His Majesty's concubines, we both serve His Majesty, quickly get up. How could the Gong Prince's biological mother be willing? If Imperial concubine Su didn't help, she would keep kneeling. Imperial concubine Su's complexion naturally became worse. Retreating 2 steps, she forcefully pulled back her sleeve, coldly glancing at her, then looked at Li Hongyuan, who was stepping on the table. Yuan, that's enough, it's just a few words, don't tell me you really want to kill your blood-related brother because of this. Li Hongyuan finally reacted, turning his head and looking at Imperial concubine Su, perhaps because of the position, there was a hint of condescension in his voice, just a few words, Imperial concubine mother thinks so. Imperial concubine Su's heart unconsciously thumped, those who didn't know would only think that she wanted to turn big things into small things into nothing, but in fact, she was targeting Jingwan. 2 light words, to some extent, confirmed the Gong Prince's words. Jean Qin Wang Fei was unruly, without decorum, shameless in front of everyone, she was simply throwing away the face of the imperial family. In the end, Imperial concubine Su dared to set traps for Jingwan again and again with words, only because she felt that Li Hongyuan's temperament was straightforward, he was impatient, he didn't even understand the twists and turns of the inner palace. More importantly, she still subconsciously felt that she, Imperial concubine mother, was the most important person in his heart. Even if there was a gap between mother and son, it wouldn't change this. As long as it didn't involve Prince Rui, then, for other things, this son would still listen to her. Imperial concubine Su didn't answer, she seemed to be thinking about what to say, but Li Hongyuan spoke first. In the imperial family, if there really is such a thing as blood brothers, then there wouldn't be so many you and I fighting. I can let him go, but, Imperial concubine mother, this is the last time. Li Hongyuan retracted his foot and sent the Gong Prince flying. Imperial concubine Su didn't quite understand what this last time meant, but intuition told her that it definitely wasn't a good thing. After sending the Gong Prince flying, Li Hongyuan didn't stop there, his foot hooked, and that antique copper pot was also sent flying. It hit the Gong Prince's back with a dong, and then rolled to the ground. The remaining soup in the pot splashed all over the Gong Prince. The ground was also a mess. Fortunately, it hit the back. If it hit the head, maybe he really would have died. That copper pot wasn't light. Of course, in all likelihood, it was the result of Li Hongyuan's deliberate control. The Gong Prince's current appearance was really as embarrassing as it could be. Since birth, he had never encountered such a thing, in front of so many foreign envoys, in front of so many civil and military officials, in front of all his brothers and sisters, in front of all his concubines. It could be said that he had lost all his face. His vision turned black. He didn't know if it was because he was angry, or because he was beaten, but then, he finally fainted as he wished. Li Hongyuan came down from the table, brushing off his robe that wasn't stained with anything, and straightening out his cuffs. His demeanor was still calm and indifferent, completely unaware that he had just done something that could be described as shocking in the eyes of others. Come, prepare another antique soup. How many people sucked in a breath of cold air? After doing such a thing, he could still eat it. There was a faint commotion in the direction of the foreign envoys. Li Hongyuan lightly swept his gaze over. You all, did you enjoy watching the show? In fact, they did enjoy it, but inexplicably, no one dared to look at Li Hongyuan. Even the people from Western Han, former Wei, Southern Qi, and other countries were the same. They either immediately ate, looked down at the ground, or turned to talk to others. Only the last situation was a little awkward. There was no tacit understanding between the two. You look at me, I look at him, not face to face. It was incomparably awkward. Even so, they still appeared to be particularly focused, indicating that they really weren't watching the show just now. From another point of view, if the people from Qi Yuan went to other countries, at the birthday banquet, first there was the poisoning of the imperial concubine, and then there was the blatant quarrel between brothers. Wouldn't they be happy? After all, they were enemies. The fiercer the internal conflict, the happier they would be. Perhaps there were no substantial benefits, but they could completely attack the other party mentally and verbally. No matter what, even if they won by half a point, it was still a victory, right? Therefore, the people from Qi Yuan could actually understand the current mentality of these envoys. They originally felt that it was exceptionally shameful, but when Jin Qinhuang made a move, the envoys all avoided him and didn't dare to say or do anything. It made them inexplicably feel that even if their side lost face, it was something that others didn't dare to look at. It was as if, when the master's family had a conflict, the servants could only pretend that they didn't know anything. That's right, it was this kind of feeling. Many people looked at each other, and then looked away without leaving a trace. That's right, it turns out that they weren't the only ones with this idea, and then they calmed down. But this atmosphere didn't last long. The Gong Qinhuang mother and the Gong Qinhuang consort stumbled over to the Gong Qinhuang consort. The Gong Qinhuang consort hesitated, but the Gong Qinhuang mother didn't care about the dirt at all. She picked up the unconscious Gong Qinhuang consort. Someone, call the imperial physician, call the imperial physician. What? The imperial physician seemed to be all in the Sweet Dew Palace at this time. It was unlikely that they would come over. But, was it possible to carry this dirty Gong Qinhuang to the Sweet Dew Palace? After a slight hesitation, they had no choice but to choose the latter. The worst-case scenario was to take off the Gong Qinhuang consort's outer robe. After all, the other places were actually fine. They could just wipe it with a handkerchief. With the Empress's decree, several eunuchs and the Gong Qinhuang consort's personal attendants came forward to help. They didn't know if the Gong Qinhuang mother did it intentionally or unintentionally, but although she took off the Gong Qinhuang consort's outer robe, she didn't carefully wipe off the dirt that splashed on his hair and neck. Li Hongyuan didn't notice, and even if he did, he wouldn't have any reaction. He just wanted to show off to his old man, to put on a good show of bitterness. He'd already beaten him, he'd already injured him. These external things really didn't matter. After the Gong Qinhuang consort was sent away, the palace servants began to tidy up the floor, tidying up the Jin Qinhuang consort seat. When they were almost done, Lu Qingdi appeared. When Lu Qingdi saw Li Hongyuan, he had a helpless expression, rubbing his throbbing temples. "You evil creature, why can't you stop?" When the Jin Qinhuang consort made a move on the Gong Qinhuang consort, someone obviously went to report to Lu Qingdi, most likely sent by the empress. It wasn't that the empress was partial to the Gong Qinhuang consort, but because Li Hongyuan went crazy, ordinary people simply couldn't control him. Although he talked back to Lu Qingdi, making Lu Qingdi stomp his feet in anger, but as a son, he still listened to his old man's words most of the time. When Lu Qingdi came over, he most likely encountered the Gong Qinhuang consort's party. As a mother, one of the imperial consorts must have cried miserably, fiercely adding oil to the fire. Today's events were too many for Lu Qingdi. It was great joy, great sorrow, great anger, and even the fear of death. His body wasn't very good to begin with, and now it could be said that he was physically and mentally exhausted. No matter what Li Hongyuan did, he didn't want to look into it, or it could be said that he didn't have the energy to look into it. After sitting down, he said, "Old Six, calm down." 5 simple words, and this matter was over. Over like this. The envoys were very surprised. This emperor, being so biased, was there really no problem? There really wasn't a problem, just get used to it. For the Qi Yuan side, it was a bit surprising that Lu Qingdi still didn't do anything, but thinking about Lu Qingdi's current state, one after another, they calmed down. It could only be said that the Gong Qinhuang consort brought this upon himself, but he was also very unlucky. The former Wei Kingdom's 5th prince's gaze fell on Li Hongyuan for a long time. His mood was a bit complicated. He seemed to admire Li Hongyuan a little. For a prince to be able to do this, it was really amazing, but there was also a bit of envy and jealousy, and something else that couldn't be explained clearly. In the capital of Wei Kingdom, he was also a tyrant, running amok, but in the face of the important ministers of the court, he didn't dare to do anything. In front of his imperial father, he restrained all the edges and corners of his body. He didn't dare to show his surly side. Even if something happened, it was the crown prince who secretly helped him clean it up. He didn't dare to report it to his imperial father. Unlike Li Hongyuan, who was unscrupulous in everything, he wasn't afraid of anything. This person, to be able to live to this extent, even if his life was shortened, it was still not in vain. Gue Fei, the banquet is over, the rest of the matters will be arranged by you. Lu Qingdi said after drinking a few mouthfuls of water. Yes, Your Majesty. Gue Fei Su originally wanted to talk to Li Hongyuan, but now it looked like she couldn't. Fortunately, the imperial garden was already prepared, so she didn't need to work too hard. Even though the phoenix seal was in Qin Shu Fei's hands and imperial concubine Su was assisting her, Qin Shu Fei was never one to monopolize power. The birthday celebration this time was part of the palace's affairs. She had discussed everything with imperial concubine Su before deciding. Thus, imperial concubine Su knew everything and would not mess up. Other than so many things, it was actually time to disperse. After all, most people were not in the mood. However, Qin Shu Fei's situation was still unclear. Once the palace gates were opened, if people with ulterior motives were allowed to leave the palace, or if people were allowed to take some important things out of the palace, it would be even more troublesome to investigate. https://11/118007/8189880. Chapter 413. The snow in the imperial garden had been cleared. Although it was winter, it was not bleak. All kinds of lanterns and ornaments were decorated. It looked exceptionally beautiful, and there was even an illusion of being in a fairyland. However, there was a small problem. Oh my God, it was too cold, wasn't it? Jingwan believed that the so-called fairyland was a kind of atmosphere created by everyone's breath. Jingwan was fully armed. Her cloak was pulled up again, and her hood was pulled over her head. She carried an exquisite hand warmer in her arms as she walked side by side with Li Hongyuan. It's late at night and it's cold. We're fine, but for those who are older, if they have shoulder or back pain, even if they're wearing thick clothes, they'll still feel the cold wind and the knives drilling into their bones. Who knows how uncomfortable it will be? It'll be so comfortable if they can just go home and lie in bed. Ah Yuan, why was Imperial Father born in such a weather? It's fine if it's cold a few times during the new year, but there's also a long life. Because they were surrounded by their own people and the surroundings were spacious, they were not ordinary people. Jingwan's voice was slightly lower than usual, but her ridicule was not polite. Not many times. Li Hongyuan calmly responded. Jingwan was shocked. These words were already disgraceful. Could it be that her husband was preparing to make a move? Li Hongyuan looked at her sideways and reached out to touch her face. It was a little cold after coming out for a while. I won't do anything. I'll never be the one who's anxious. The current situation is chaotic and stable. When some people can't stabilize, they'll naturally go to extremes. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. What I want to do is to be the hunter who keeps an eye on the oriole. If it were me, I might be able to keep him alive for a few more years. This, he obviously referred to Luqingdi, and Li Hongyuan probably didn't really want to save him. At most, he wouldn't kill him. However, by then, even if Luqingdi survived, he would only be a retired emperor without his full strength. To be honest, in Jingwan's eyes, the occupation of retired emperor was actually quite miserable. It was even worse than being a puppet emperor. After all, the puppet emperor had never held power and did not know the feeling of overturning the world. As for retired emperors, because they had obtained it before, it was even more painful to lose it. Throughout history, there had been many empress dowagers. There had been many empress dowagers, but there had not been many empress dowagers. As an emperor, unless he was dead, it was basically impossible for him to put down his full strength. Even if the emperor was not in good health and there was a crown prince or a prince who was in charge of the country, the empress dowager would definitely keep a tight watch behind the scenes. They were afraid that their son would have evil intentions. The slightest disturbance would immediately make them nervous, and they might even make an extremely wrong decision. It was possible for an emperor to be forced to become an empress dowager, but was there anyone who voluntarily abdicated and was willing to do so? As for your grandfather and grandmother, don't worry. I will have people take care of them. There won't be any problems. Jingwan glanced at him. She knew that there was no need for her to worry. Grandmother had already used this to tease her before. In Jingwan's eyes, the atmosphere in this kind of day would not be lively. However, Jingwan still felt that she was too narrow-minded. When they left Thousand Years Hall, everyone knew that Qin Shufei's poison was already under control. Although she was still unconscious, her life was not in danger. As such, it was not unreasonable for them to be a little more relaxed. Although there were not many young men and women who entered the palace with their elders today, there were still quite a number of them. After all, they were still in a lively state and there was a good atmosphere to set off. Perhaps it was because of the previous nervousness that they felt, but at this moment, it was very lively. Jingwan and the others were still in the outer circle. After all, they had come here with Li Hongyuan leisurely and could be considered as the last group. Sigh, there was no other way. The living king of hell was really too terrifying. There was no benefit to be gained from it. Naturally, no one was willing to walk with them, much less try to worm their way into being friends with them. Those who were originally walking at the same speed as them also hurriedly left for various reasons. Jingwan glanced at a rockery nearby. There were two figures behind it. There was an 80 to 90% chance that they were the Imperial Guards. It seemed that in order to prevent any more accidents, the entire area of activity had been surrounded. There would not be any restrictions on moving around inside, but once they left, they would most likely be interfered with. If something really happened, they would even be closely served and followed closely behind like a tail. Retracting her gaze, she stood at the top of the stone steps and looked down at the people below. Some were chatting, some were laughing, and some were playing. They were in groups of 3 to 5, and there were even groups of up to 10 people. Not to mention being alone, there were even very few people in groups of 2. Ah, Yuan, seeing this scene, what do you think? If I wasn't by your side, you would be all alone. Sai, you are a person who has lived for more than 20 years. Why don't you have 1 or 2 close friends? Even if the requirements are lower, not to mention close friends, as long as you can get along well and occasionally drink wine together, you don't even have one. Don't you feel that you are a failure? Jingwan said with a bit of ridicule, but more than that, there was actually a hidden heartache in the depths of her heart. It should be a very painful thing for a person to not have a close confidant since childhood. Li Hongyuan was a little amused. He stroked Jingwan's back. It's those people who are too low level. Your husband is simply unwilling to pay attention to them. Jingwan was speechless. Her heartache lasted for 3 seconds. Was this the kind of IQ that was too high to have any friends? But he didn't seem to show it to the outside world. There were always people who stuck to him. If he added that he was too handsome to have any friends, and he was too violent to have any friends, it seemed to make sense. Wan, don't worry. Your husband is doing very well. In this aspect, he really didn't care much. Whether or not he had any fair-weather friends in his previous life, he had already forgotten. The gap in his memory was a little long, so he didn't have any impression of them. It could only be said that they were completely unimportant. Jingwan could see that he really didn't force himself at all. Alright, there was no need to worry. After all, there were some people's worlds that outsiders couldn't understand. In this regard, Jingwan and Li Hongyuan really couldn't reach the same frequency. After all, when she was in Qian Prefecture, she had many friends. Although she wasn't particularly close, there were many people who held her arm when she went out to admire flowers. After entering the capital, she also made friends at the fastest speed. They were close friends, better than those in Qian Prefecture. The two of them held hands and walked down the stone stairs unhurriedly. In order to accompany her husband, Jingwan didn't join in on the fun. As for Li Hongyuan, at this moment, his selfish nature was displayed to the extreme. His wife naturally had to be by his side at this time. Jingwan saw a flower lantern somewhere and made a soft sound of surprise. She walked forward and reached out to touch the rather childish flower lantern. She smiled and said, "These should be the hands of the little prince and princess." Who knows? Li Hongyuan wasn't interested in these things. Jingwan sighed a little helplessly. This person was really, soon after, they walked around most of the places. It was just that, everywhere they went, it seemed that everyone consciously made way. There was basically no one else within 1 zhang. 1 zhang equals 3. 3m, when they met, they would greet each other from 1 zhang. 1 zhang equals 3. 3m away. Then, there would be all kinds of natural or unnatural turns. This kind of feeling of being rejected and disliked by everyone, although in fact, these people were afraid of the living king of hell. They were afraid that if they said something wrong, the living king of hell would fly into a rage. As the victim, they didn't come out to seek justice. At least in the beginning, Jingwan was indeed a little embarrassed. However, as time passed, Jingwan also calmed down. In any case, she was basically not familiar with these people. Her impression of them was only that she had met them twice. Basically, they were on the level of matching names. There was nothing more. Then, regarding these people, perhaps they were deliberately united to create a sign of joint resistance against Jean Qin Wang. If someone didn't care, she naturally didn't need to care. Then, finally, someone had the guts to block the road. Jingwan originally thought that not everyone was wallowing in the mire, but after seeing who it was, Jingwan found that she was still too naive. It turned out that it was noble consort Su who sent someone to find Li Hongyuan. Wang Ye and Yang is now free and invites you to have a chat. That eunuch was respectful and even had a bit of fear and trepidation. When you're free, you come find Ben Wang. When you're not free, then have you forgotten Ben Wang beyond the 9 heavens? It wasn't a question, but a simple statement of a fact. That was all. This was in Li Hongyuan's eyes. In other people's ears, it was completely not the case. It was more like deliberately finding fault in a fit of pique. That eunuch's forehead was also faintly covered in sweat. Noble consort Su definitely didn't mean it like that. Under normal circumstances, there was nothing wrong with his words. The problem was that Li Hongyuan had found a loophole. If these words were to reach noble consort Su's ears, he might be skinned alive. Wang Ye, it's all this servant's fault. This servant didn't think before speaking. Pa. This servant fiercely slapped his mouth a few times. Don't misunderstand noble consort. Noble consort Su loves Wang Ye the most. Li Hongyuan's expression was indifferent and he didn't comment. His relationship with noble consort Su was getting worse and worse, and he wasn't in the mood to protect her. Noble consort Su had always believed that their relationship as mother and son was deep, and even if there was a gap, it wouldn't become a grudge. She was originally such a shrewd woman who could see through everything, but on this point, she seemed to have been blinded. She believed that at most, he was angry and jealous because of Li Hongming, and that there wouldn't be any problems with their 20 years of relationship as mother and son. Speaking of which, this kind of self-confidence was also self-righteous. However, she insisted on coming to his door again and again, so she deserved to be angered by him. Li Hongyuan indicated that his temper this time was quite long. Seeing that Li Hongyuan seemed to be indifferent, that eunuch became more and more anxious. If he couldn't invite this master over, noble consort Su would definitely not let him off. Occupying the commanding position, Li Hongyuan looked at these people jumping around in front of him as if he was watching a play. When he was happy, he would just watch for fun. When he was unhappy, at worst, he would just teach them a lesson. There was no other way. Some people were born to be wretched and deserved a beating. Why aren't you leading the way? Just as the eunuch was anxiously running around in circles, Li Hongyuan finally opened his mouth mercifully. Being treated so rudely, the eunuch felt relieved. He didn't dare to have any negative feelings towards Li Hongyuan and was deeply grateful. Li Hongyuan naturally reached out his hand to block Jingwan's back. His meaning couldn't be more obvious. Jingwan tilted her head and glanced at him. Noble consort Su was only looking for him, not her. This eunuch also expressed himself very clearly. It was impossible for him not to understand. Therefore, it was 100% intentional. This man was really dedicated to finding fault today. He provoked one person after another. It was as if he wouldn't stop until everyone's blood pressure rose. It felt very childish. Li Hongyuan slightly raised his eyebrows. He was just too bored. Even if his wife was by his side, he couldn't be too close. He was unhappy, so naturally, he had to find other ways to make up for it. That eunuch naturally didn't notice the exchange of glances between the two. He lowered his head in fear. Prince, then, if you have something to say, just say it. What are you hemming and hawing for? Li Hongyuan's voice lowered a bit, making people feel their skin tremble. Prince, noble consort Su only invited you. He could only bite the bullet and quickly finish speaking. Then, he closed his eyes and waited for death. Ha! Li Hongyuan chuckled, ridiculing and sinister. Prince. He complained incessantly in his heart. His legs went soft and he almost knelt on the ground. Jingwan reached out to pat Li Hongyuan's arm. In the end, he's just passing on a message to Mu Fei. Don't make it hard for him. No one has it easy. You go, I'll go find grandmother and the others to talk. Even though I've seen them a few times today, I haven't been able to have a good chat. At this moment, the eunuch really felt that Jin Qin Wang Fei was the best person in the world. She was gentle and considerate. She was also kind to the servants. Her words really hit the bottom of his heart. If their master was happy, they might not benefit from it. If their master was unhappy, they might become a punching bag. If their master was not happy, they might become a punching bag. If their master was not happy, they might become the punching bag. If they were capable, it would be fine. If they were not, there would be a layer of servants above them. Those people were even more arrogant than their master. They would oppress those of lower status to show that they were also people above others. Apart from this, sometimes even passing a message would bring about unexpected disaster. Being scolded and beaten was still a light punishment. There was even the possibility of losing their lives. And if they died, then so be it. It would be good if they could get a broken mat. Only you are kind and soft-hearted to even consider such things for them. Everyone can't choose their birth, but everyone is born and raised by their parents. Alright, don't say so much. Quickly go and see Mu Fei. There might be something important. Don't let her wait too long. Jingwan comforted gently. Li Hongyuan snorted. He seemed to be very disdainful of Jingwan's words. But he didn't say anything else. His attitude and expression unconsciously softened. That eunuch was secretly shocked. He seemed to have discovered something incredible. Li Hongyuan and Jingwan went their separate ways. Li Hongyuan had someone to lead the way. Jingwan was different. At this time, she didn't know where the Luo family was. Today, only Nanny Gong and Bai Xiao followed Jingwan into the palace. During the banquet, Bai Xiao didn't even enter the hall. At this time, she was outside. There were many envoys who did not know etiquette. Naturally, Jingwan couldn't relax around her. Therefore, without so many people, she naturally couldn't know where the Luo family was at the first moment. Of course, this was not difficult. There were many palace maids and eunuchs serving by the side. She could ask any one of them and it wouldn't take long for her to know the answer. Jingwan found a place and waited while studying the riddles on the lanterns. Jean Princess Consort. Someone called out softly. But the voice was a little tactful. It seemed to have been slowly spat out from the tip of the tongue. It was tainted with a touch of ambiguity and was exceptionally sticky. Hearing the voice, Jingwan couldn't help but tremble. In an instant, goosebumps appeared all over her body. She turned around and saw the unexpected guest a few steps away. She couldn't help but curse in her heart. She had seen Wei Xianfei at the banquet at the beginning. After that, they didn't seem to have any interactions. This princess of the former Wei dynasty had very unique eyes. Was her voice or the way she spoke also unique? Jingwan wanted to say that many men wouldn't like this way of speaking. Of course, if they liked this way of speaking, they would feel their bones would be melted. Greetings, Your Highness. Jingwan bent down and didn't wait for Wei Xianfei to call her up. In the face of her former love rival, Jingwan smiled. Wei Xianfei's expression was distorted for a moment. In the face of Jingwan's rudeness, the palace maids beside Wei Xianfei didn't dare to say a word. They were outsiders and came from Qi Yuan's #1 enemy country. Their own princess ascending the throne was also quite disgraceful. Now that the eldest prince and the others were still here, they might reluctantly give them some face. But what if they left? Therefore, they absolutely couldn't offend people now. Especially after seeing Jin Qinhuang's cruelty. If they offended his Wang Fei, their own princess might be directly killed. According to Luqing Emperor's love for Jin Qinhuang, their own princess's death might not even cause a splash. And with just them, they probably couldn't even send the news back to Dawei. Therefore, the best way to behave was to tuck one's tail between one's legs. Just like in Dawei, scolding people who were disrespectful and rude to the princess, only a fool would do such a thing. Jingwan secretly sighed. Sure enough, no matter how she looked on the surface, it was difficult to calm down in her heart. In addition to power, Jin Qinhuang was definitely 800 streets ahead of his father. If it wasn't for a special purpose, in a situation where the two people didn't know each other well, 10 women would definitely take a fancy to Li Hongyuan. Unfortunately, on this point, Jingwan would never give in. No one could. Jin Qinhuang Fei is in a good mood. It seems that Xian Fei Nyang is also in a good mood. Jingwan's smile remained unchanged, gentle and dignified, calm and magnanimous. In her heart, she secretly said that fortunately, things had returned to normal. Wei Xianfei's face was a bit stiff. She didn't have any feelings for Jingwan. Even if she took a fancy to Jin Qinhuang, she didn't care about Jin Qinhuang Xingfei. However, when she held a banquet, not only did Jingwan not go, she didn't even give an excuse to refuse. Even though Wei Xianfei used this as a pretext to make a fuss, but it was the first time that she was swept away in such a way. It was impossible to say that she wasn't angry. Naturally, she bore a grudge. But other than that, there was nothing else. In the end, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. She unexpectedly became an elder. She didn't even have a chance to speak a word and the dream was broken. How could she be reconciled? But she couldn't go to Jin Qinhuang now. Otherwise, she would die a very ugly death. Then, she found Jingwan. In fact, she didn't know what use finding Jingwan would have, nor did she know what to say. However, after seeing Jingwan up close, she knew that she had underestimated this Jin Qinhuang Fei. Even if she really entered Jin Qinhuang Fu as she wished, she wouldn't be as relaxed as she imagined. Jingwan was stared at by her and felt inexplicable. But her face didn't show it at all, with a bit of indifference. This princess of the former Wei has become Xian Fei, Jin Qinhuang Fei should be very happy. A young woman next to her said with a smile that was neither light nor heavy. Because Wei Xianfei found Jingwan and because Jin Qinhuang wasn't present, more and more people gathered around. Moreover, these people were not like Li Hongyuan and Jingwan. They more or less had misgivings, so basically, men and women were separated. The people here were basically all beautiful women. Each and every one of them had a reserved smile, but their hearts were burning with the soul of gossip. Excitement was clearly written in their eyes as they waited to watch a good show. Isn't that so? After all, Jin Qinhuang Fei is the #1 in the capital. Jealous woman. Even if some things changed later on, some people still stubbornly put the title of jealous woman on Jingwan's head. The more a woman was angered by a concubine in her own house, the more she was like this. When she spoke to others, there wasn't a single fierce word, but every sentence was filled with deep malice. Like a needle hidden in silk floss, every word was filled with thorns. If they didn't live well, they wouldn't want others to live well. Even if they couldn't do anything, they would splash a basin of dirty water and put a black mark on them. In the end, Jingwan was just a woman. Moreover, she looked amiable and good-tempered. The people around her became more and more unscrupulous. They laughed and giggled as if they didn't say anything, but the more they tried to cover it up, the more obvious it was. People who didn't know would think that there were a lot of unspeakable secrets hidden inside. Just like Wei Xianfei, her thoughts were a bit crooked. However, if she were to pursue it now, it would be completely meaningless. Jingwan's gaze moved away from Wei Xianfei and swept across the people around her. The smile on her face faded little by little, and the warmth in her eyes disappeared little by little. Those people who were laughing and chatting gradually stopped. The expression on their faces was a bit stiff, and they couldn't help but take 2 steps back. If they didn't pay attention, they would step on the people behind them. After a moment, the corners of Jingwan's mouth rose again. It was as if spring had returned to the earth, and the ice had thawed. Looking gentle and beautiful, she said, "This princess, as a woman, has always been pitiful. I don't easily hurt people with my words, but occasionally, I may complain about small things. I don't know if His Highness will find your husband when the time comes." As soon as these words came out, the women were shocked. One by one, their hearts beat wildly. One by one, they retreated and hid, trying to avoid Jingwan's sight, for fear that she would remember them. Among the 7, there is one, tongue. If your husband brings disaster because of your mouth, I don't know if he will punish you in the name of tongue. The unfinished words couldn't be more obvious. The smile on Jingwan's face didn't change, but in the eyes of these people, it was simply the most sinister smile of the devil. Don't step back. It's not good to step on people. If you fall, it's even worse. Maybe you will be more seriously injured. Everyone seemed to have been immobilized. Their bodies were particularly stiff. Dead silence. For a moment. Princess. The person in front of Jingwan's line of sight tried to ease the situation. After all, if Jingwan really wanted to do something, she would be the first to bear the brunt. My temper is actually quite good, but our prince likes to follow his lead. I can't disobey him, can I? Jingwan was gentle, but these people were scared out of their wits. They really wanted to slap themselves twice. Who told you to talk so much? The palace maid who went to look for the Luo family didn't know what was going on inside. She could only respectfully ask these noblewomen to move aside. With someone coming to save the scene, these people were naturally happy and quickly moved aside. The scene was like welcoming a big shot. Instead, the palace maid was so scared that she didn't dare to go in. Jingwan was in the most central position. She glanced over. Have you figured it out? The palace maid hurriedly squatted, replying to Princess, it's clear. Lord Luo and Madame Luo are both in Linhui Pavilion. Jingwan nodded. As expected, Imperial Concubine Su and Imperial Concubine Qin arranged it together. It was impossible that they did not consider those elderly people. If a large group of people fell ill because of Lu Qingdi's birthday, that would be extremely unlucky. It was simply cursing Lu Qingdi. The Pavilion of Resurrection was a pavilion in the Imperial Garden. Compared to the various halls, it was much smaller in scale. However, it was much larger than the pavilions in the courtyard. It was built with pavilions and terraces. To put it bluntly, it was a place for people to rest when they were tired of walking in the Imperial Garden. Afterwards, they could enjoy the scenery while they were at it. There was more than one place like this. This kind of loft actually didn't have the function of keeping warm. However, if the layers of curtains were all put down and only some special places were left to be hung to ensure ventilation and a brazier was lit, it was definitely much better than being outside. Jingwan pulled down her hood and held on to the hand warmer. I won't disturb Xianfei Nyang's mood. I'll take my leave first. Following the principle of getting out of the way, she left unhurriedly. Threatening a large group of people and then leaving as if nothing had happened. The impression that Jingwan left on these people this time was enough to completely subvert her previous image. The people left behind were still trembling. They weren't sure if Jean Qinhuang Fei was joking or if she would really do it. But there was one thing that they were 100% sure of. If Jean Qinhuang really came knocking on their door, the possibility of them being divorced was very high. In the entire capital, there weren't many who dared to be unyielding and contend with Jean Qinhuang. No matter what, after this, these people would at least restrain their mouths a lot and wouldn't dare to rashly act up again. Lin Huilu was still a little far from where Jingwan was now. Along the winding corridor, it went all the way to the other side, halfway up the mountain. Jingwan wasn't in a hurry. On the other side, Li Hongyuan had already seen noble consort Su and gave a perfunctory greeting. However, Li Hongyuan was used to doing this, so noble consort Su didn't feel that there was a problem at all. Subsequently, noble consort Su subconsciously wanted to reach out and pull Li Hongyuan's arm, but Li Hongyuan avoided her. The expression on noble consort Su's face stiffened for a moment, then she sighed sadly. Yuaner is really estranged from Mu Fei. Mu Fei called for a Ken. What matter did Mu Fei have? Li Hongyuan asked with an indifferent expression. As for the sadness on noble consort Su's face, he acted as if he didn't see it and was indifferent. If it was in the past, he might have comforted noble consort Su with a few words, but now, sorry, he already didn't have that interest. As for what noble consort Su would think of his reaction, Li Hongyuan also didn't have the interest to understand. Noble consort Su was really at a loss. Looking at Li Hongyuan, the uneasiness on her face increased as the lecture progressed. Finally, she seemed to have no choice but to open her mouth with some caution. Does Yuaner think that you are angry with Mu Fei because of the previous matter? But Yuaner, today is your Fu Wang's birthday after all. After all, he is your blood-related brother. It doesn't matter how you argue in private, but with so many people, if the brothers don't get along, your Fu Wang will definitely lose face. Moreover, if something really happens, your Fu Wang will definitely not. Mu Fei, Li Hongyuan's patience ran out and his expression became colder. In your eyes, I Ken is just a child who will never grow up. What you say is what? I Ken has always taken revenge for enmity and resentment. Today's matter won't be left for tomorrow. Like this, in your eyes, I Ken is straightforward and doesn't know how to beat around the bush. Do you also think that I Ken completely doesn't understand your twisted words? Noble consort Su was at a loss. Yuaner, what do you mean? What do I mean? Li Hongyuan's face was full of disappointment. Those brothers who are only half-blood related, if you are angry with Mu Fei because of them, Mu Fei should think about it. Can our mother-son relationship still be maintained until today? Even now, Mu Fei still wants to pretend to be confused and fool a Ken. Then a Ken might as well tell Mu Fei directly, Luo Shi is also the daughter-in-law that you have longed for 6 years. Urchin's previous fiancés all met with mishaps, yet she married into Jean Qinhuang Fu and did her best for a Ken. Based on this point, shouldn't Mu Fei treat her a little better? Without her, can Mu Fei find a second woman who is not subdued by a Ken? Even if this point is removed, Luo Shi did not do anything wrong. Why are you always targeting her, always hiding needles in your words and setting traps everywhere? A Ken thought that Mu Fei should have understood Urchin's meaning at the welcoming banquet of the former Wei and Chang kingdoms. Unfortunately, you didn't. Luo Shi and I are one as husband and wife. Her honor and disgrace are closely linked to a Ken. When Mu Fei targets her, are you sure you can completely cast me aside? You are recognized as the best mother-in-law in the entire inner palace. You can treat Third Sao as your own, but why do you dislike Luo Shi so much? A Ken doesn't ask for much and doesn't need you to treat her well. It's enough as long as you don't target her. Can't you even do this? Noble consort Su's lips trembled. She didn't know if it was because her son saw through her unbearable and was at a loss, or because she was angry because her son helped his wife in every way. Mufei, although Aken was not born by you, Aken was raised by you. Aken knows all your efforts. As the saying goes, the grace of raising is greater than the grace of giving birth. Aken will never forget your good deeds. Aken doesn't care what kind of person you are, what kind of temperament you have, because you are Mufei. In the past, no matter what happened, I didn't care about it. It wasn't that I didn't understand or didn't know, but because it had nothing to do with me. It was also because you are Mufei. Now, Mufei's actions make Aken bitterly disappointed. Aken doesn't know why you are like this. Is it because Imperial Father is getting older and older? In your eyes, even I have become an obstacle to Third Imperial Brother, so you don't like Luo Shi in every way. Actually, you don't target Luo Shi, but Aken, right? Of course not. You honor, how can you think like that? How can you? Noble consort Su was abnormally agitated. She was about to collapse after being misunderstood by her son. She completely threw away the part about Jingwan. Then, Mufei, tell me, what is your reason for targeting Luo Shi? Don't say that you don't have any. Noble consort Su opened and closed her mouth, but she couldn't say anything. She knew that this son was actually very smart, but she didn't expect him to see through her so clearly. However, this son had never seen how she treated Lu Shi. In fact, it was also her. Every time this son was present, he wouldn't say anything about Lu Shi. Now, if she told him that she treated her two daughters-in-law the same, would he believe her? Also, because Lu Shi was obedient and Luo Shi was disobedient, she targeted Luo Shi regardless of the occasion. Could she tell him that? Mufei, you have nothing to say. In order to prevent the last bit of affection between mother and son from being erased, this son will do his best to enter the palace less in the future. This son will take his leave. Li Hongyuan turned and left rather straightforwardly. You honor, stop. Come back. Listen to Mufei, it's not like that. It's really not, unfortunately. Noble consort Su chased after him, but Li Hongyuan remained indifferent. The people around noble consort Su didn't dare to stop him at all. Even when noble consort Su tripped and fell to the ground, causing the palace maids and eunuchs to cry out in alarm, Li Hongyuan only paused for a moment and still left without looking back. Such a commotion naturally attracted the attention of the people nearby, but they didn't know the details for the time being. After all, this wasn't noble consort Su's Jade Essence Palace. On the other side, Jingwan found Luo Peishan and old Madame Luo. Luo Peishan, this dignified first-rank official, didn't care about court matters with other colleagues, but accompanied his wife to eat melon seeds and chat about daily life. This made those noblewomen who wanted to find old Madame Luo feel embarrassed to come forward. It was really enough. Who doesn't know that Jin Qin Wang is very clingy to his wife? Why did he let you out now? Luo Peishan teased. So, grandfather is learning from Wang Ye and clinging to Zumu. Jingwan impolitely retorted. Cough, cough, cough. Luo Peishan obviously didn't expect Jingwan to say this. He choked and coughed violently. Old Madame Luo hurriedly patted his back and looked at Jingwan reproachfully. You, this girl, are really becoming more and more outrageous. Jingwan also knew that she was wrong and hurriedly poured water to apologize. Luo Peishan slowly recovered and bitterly lamented, my good grandson how long has it been, and Jin Qin Wang has already led him astray. Enough, you also know when to stop. Old Madame Luo reprimanded Luo Darren. Luo Peishan obediently shut his mouth and pouted at Jingwan and old Madame Luo. His meaning was, look, your grandmother is very fierce now. In the whole family, she is the boss. No one dares to say 2 if she says 1. Jingwan laughed. Her laughter was very unrestrained. After the joke, of course, she still asked about Li Hongyuan's whereabouts. After getting the answer, the 2 elders clearly thought of some of noble consort Su's actions and naturally felt indignant. However, Jin Qinhuang and noble consort Su had a good relationship, which more or less made old Madame Luo mind. When it came to mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues, as the person caught in the middle, once she sided with one side, the other side would suffer a lot. Grandmother, rest assured. Some things are not as simple as they seem on the surface. https://11/11807/82222385 HTML. Chapter 4:14. Jingwan drank some hot tea with the 2 elders, ate some snacks, and chatted with them at the same time. It was very pleasant. Then, not long after, Li Hongyuan appeared. Jingwan was surprised, so fast. She thought that she would have to wait until she left the palace to see him. Li Hongyuan waved his hand, excusing Luo Darren and Luo Lao Furen from the ceremony. These 2 people were also not polite. Ceremony cannot be abolished. Obviously, they would not be so polite to the person who stole their granddaughter. Li Hongyuan sat next to Jingwan, directly took Jingwan's teacup and drank 2 mouthfuls before opening his mouth. Things fell apart. His expression and tone were very indifferent. To be unhappy with the person who raised him for so many years, even if his mood wasn't that bad, at least it shouldn't be as if nothing happened. The 2 elders of the Luo family looked at each other. So to say, the relationship between Jin Qinhuang and Su Guifei seemed to be more complicated than they expected. Moreover, it was obvious that Jin Qinhuang was in the lead. Not to mention how Su Guifei treated Jingwan. This point was very disgusting, but she was after all the person who raised him for more than 20 years. Their impression of her was still somewhat bad. He was able to operate such a large power under the eyes of so many people, yet he could make everyone think that he had no power or influence. He was so scheming, and his skills were as high as the sky, yet he was so heartless. If he wanted to do anything to Wan Wan would definitely be played by him until not even dregs were left. Well, they didn't care about how Li Hongyuan was with other people. It didn't matter if Su Guifei was killed by him, they were only worried about Jingwan. Li Hongyuan saw their expressions but didn't say anything. How he treated Jingwan, he didn't need to use his mouth to tell others. He would only use his actions. Sooner or later, he would let those who truly cared about Jingwan feel absolutely assured about him. Every time Jingwan was mentioned, they would say that she was blessed to have married a good husband. Of course, he wasn't deliberately doing this for others to see. After all, as time passed, outsiders would eventually find out, and it would be easy to guess what they would say. Jingwan's attention was on Li Hongyuan. Can't you get someone to serve you a cup of tea? It only takes a moment. Li Hongyuan's gaze fell on her lips. What hasn't this prince eaten before? Do you care about this? Perhaps only the inexperienced young lady would not understand the deeper meaning of these words. It was fine if she messed around in private, but now, in front of the 2 elders, Jingwan's face immediately turned red. Not to mention now, even in her previous life, it would be quite shameful to say such things in front of the elders. Jingwan flew into a rage out of humiliation. She subconsciously stretched out her leg to kick Li Hongyuan. After the kick, she realized that she had done something stupid again. Flirting in front of her grandparents, Jingwan wished she could find a hole to hide in. Out of the corner of her eyes, she secretly glanced at the 2 elders. They were calmly drinking tea and talking to each other tacitly. It was not a forced topic, it was very natural. Jingwan exhaled and forced herself to calm down. She let the heat on her face fade away as soon as possible. She fiercely glared at Li Hongyuan. This bastard, couldn't he care about the occasion? Li Hongyuan smiled but did not speak. His own wife also had times when she would deceive herself. Laugh, laugh, laugh. What's so funny? Still laughing. Old Madame Luo saw Jingwan's rare embarrassed and angry appearance. She was really becoming more and more delicate. This little temper was also growing. This was something that she had not been able to do for several years. Looking at the obvious half of a footprint on the hem of Jin Qinhuang's robes, as a wife, her granddaughter was probably the first person to have the guts to kick her own Qinhuang husband. But this granddaughter still did not realize that she had done such a shocking thing. Looking at Jin Qinhuang, he had an indifferent appearance. Not only was he not angry, he even had a doting smile on his face. One could see the truth in the details. In private, the two should have no misgivings when interacting with each other. So, perhaps her worries were a bit unnecessary. At least for now, this was indeed the case. She still sighed in her heart. Before Wan was married, no matter how much she was pampered, in reality, because of her old woman's physical condition, Wan was always rational and restrained. She took good care of her grandmother, didn't want others to worry about her, didn't cause trouble for others, and did things that many people who had experienced hardships could not do. Jingwan did not reach her ideal appearance before getting married. It was false that she was not disappointed or regretful. After all, as a married woman, it would only be more difficult and it was even more impossible for her to show the appearance that a delicate girl should have. But now, it seemed that Wan was the complete opposite. If it was not for her husband's pampering, it was absolutely impossible for her to be like this. Moreover, it was not an ordinary pampering. Only the kind of pampering that allowed her to not worry would be like this. And with Li Hongyuan's identity and status, as long as he was willing, he could completely do this. Obviously, not only was he willing, he also did it. From this point of view, old Madame Luo felt that perhaps she should thank Jin Qinhuang. Jingwan retracted her gaze and inadvertently swept across old Madame Luo's line of sight. Her breathing became heavier, she lowered her eyes and obediently pretended to be an ostrich. Jingwan felt that it was shameful, but Li Hongyuan did not care. They were Wan's closest people. He was close to Wan. At most he would say a few words that seemed to be true and false, but he should still be happy in his heart. Therefore, there were some things that he did not have so many scruples about. Li Hongyuan was a person who did as he pleased, but in reality, when it came to Jingwan's matters, he actually cared quite a bit. Therefore, he cared about her as a person, therefore he cared about everything about her. Li Hongyuan and old Madame Luo looked at each other, both of them having a tacit understanding. Li Hongyuan chatted with the two elders of the Luo family for a while, waiting for Jingwan to voluntarily reveal her head. Because they were all considerate, Jingwan did not pretend to be an ostrich for long. They did not ask about the matter of Gui Fei Su, but Li Hongyuan took the initiative to bring it up. Not for anything else, but because they were wholeheartedly concerned about Jingwan, he reassured their hearts. Therefore, Li Hongyuan's treatment of Gui Fei Su was not heartless. There was a reason for it. There were only 4 of them present, and the servants had all retreated far away. With Li Hongyuan's keen senses, he was sure that there would not be a 5th person who heard it. Although it was not the first time that Jingwan heard Li Hongyuan talk about this matter, but hearing it again, she still felt distressed. At that time, he was only 10 years old. How could Gui Fei Su be so heartless? How could she do it? One could have feelings for a kitten or puppy, let alone a person. Moreover, it was a person who had put in a lot of effort and thought. When Jingwan faced Gui Fei Su, she actually wanted to shake her with all her might to clear her mind and ask her if she had the slightest hesitation when she took action. Although the two elders of the Luo family were more restrained, their expressions were also very ugly. In fact, this husband and wife were not people who cared about blind loyalty and filial piety. Therefore, they did not feel that Li Hongyuan's actions towards Gui Fei Su were wrong and should not be done. Thinking about it, if these two were the kind of people who would do whatever their parents say, whatever their parents do is right, and whatever their parents do cannot be disobeyed, not to mention that Li Hongyuan would not tell them anything, even Jingwan would not have a good relationship with them. After getting angry, Luo Peishan narrowed his eyes, revealing a bit of fierce danger. Gui Fei Su targeted Wanwan for no reason. Do you think this old man is a dead man? Therefore, Luo Peishan, this old fox, did not do anything that was not suitable for him to do. He was angry because of his granddaughter. What were you going to do about it? With Luo Peishan's smooth way of handling things and the help of Ruan Ruizhong, the prime minister of the cabinet, no matter how much Li Hongming suffered, he could not find a reason to complain to Lu Qingdi. Some of Gui Fei Su's methods were too smooth and successful. When she targeted Jingwan, she did not think about whether it was appropriate. The biggest difference between Jingwan and Princess Lu was that Jingwan would not be controlled by Gui Fei Su and would not be bound by reputation. Princess Lu would swallow the insult, but Jingwan would never do that. Princess Lu had never resisted. Moreover, Gui Fei Su usually trained her daughter-in-law in private, so others naturally did not know about it. Therefore, when she occasionally said something meaningful, most people would not think too much about it. However, the two elders of the Luo family were not to be trifled with. They loved Jingwan very much. Jingwan was his sweetheart. It was not an exaggeration to say that he loved Jingwan very much. Therefore, if he bullied Jingwan, he expected to get along with her as he trained Princess Lu and even bring her a good reputation. He must be dreaming. Eunuch Mu made a slight noise beside him and then approached. Master, Gui Fei Su's people are here. Gui Fei Su seems to have called for an imperial doctor just now. Li Hongyuan lowered his head to drink tea. Eunuch Mu quietly retreated. Tonight, one by one, the imperial doctors were called. Originally, I thought that this year's birthday, the heavens would be beautiful. Unfortunately, people are not beautiful. This is probably more annoying than the heavens not being beautiful. Not long after, the person who came to see Li Hongyuan went upstairs. It was the same eunuch from before. On such a cold day, he was sweating all over. It could be seen how fast he had come. Greetings to Wang Ye. The greeting went down, but Jin Qin Wang did not call for him to rise. Instead, he waited for a word, get lost. The eunuch trembled all over, but he did not dare to really get lost. If he did not pass on the message, then Wang Ye, Gui Fei Su, she, with a bang, a teacup bloomed on his forehead. Of course, his forehead also bloomed. Jin Qin Wang did not speak, but the living king of hell directly made his move. If he did not pass on the message, he might suffer when he went back. However, if he continued to speak, he might lose his life now. It was human instinct to choose the lesser of two evils. Therefore, the eunuch covered his forehead and quickly got lost. Jin Qin Wang was currently in a fit of anger. Wasn't it natural that he did not want to hear about Gui Fei Su? If he did not hear anything, he naturally did not need to see Gui Fei Su. Jingwan was quite calm. The two elders of the Luo family were still a little speechless. Therefore, this bad reputation was not without benefits. No one could be so reckless. Wang Ye, Gui Fei Su may not be pretending to be ill to force you to see her again. It is also possible that she is really ill. Is it really good not to go? Luo Darren said. So what? Li Hongyuan said as a matter of course. Your current reputation is only worthy of praise for being filial. Others did not dare to say this, but Jingwan was not polite at all. What does what other people think have to do with Ben Wang? As for Fu Huang, if Ben Wang told Fu Huang that Su Shi was worried that Ben Wang would threaten her son and secretly targeted Ben Wang, and even told him that Su Shi was hypocritical and raised Ben Wang only to fight for favor. On the surface, she was doing her best for Ben Wang, but inside, there was not a bit of sincerity. Ben Wang's temperament today is completely useless because of her. At that time, what would Su Shi's end be? Jingwan and the two elders of the Luo family fell silent. Vicious, this move was truly too vicious. Li Hongyuan and Gue Fei Su had lived together in peace for more than 20 years. They were even very close to each other as mother and son. If he said this now, the credibility wouldn't be high. However, Li Hongyuan could completely smooth things over and say that he lost his mother when he was born. Although Gue Fei Su had ulterior motives, she at least treated him well on the surface. He was grateful to Gue Fei Su for raising him and had a strong affection for her. He didn't want to be estranged from her, so he exiled himself. After all, according to his own vague memories, he should have been quite good before the age of 10. He changed after his rebirth at the age of 10, and it was a subtle change. As he grew up year after year, he understood more and more. He also understood Gue Fei Su's character more and more. In that case, it was completely reasonable to say that it was all because of Gue Fei Su. The reason why they fell out now was mainly because Gue Fei Su was becoming more and more excessive. It was already unbearable. The first sign of this was when they returned from Jiangnan. Because Li Hongyuan's situation was special, Lu Qingdi didn't want him to be too capable and have thoughts that he shouldn't have. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan developed in the direction of a good-for-nothing trash, Lu Qingdi favored him more and more. However, the result of his self-exile and the result of someone else's deliberate actions were definitely two different concepts. If Lu Qingdi believed in Li Hongyuan's words, then for the sake of balance, even if Gue Fei Su wasn't immediately banished to the cold palace, she wouldn't be separated from her position. The Jade Essence Palace would also become a cold palace without a name. Therefore, it was actually very easy for Li Hongyuan to completely overthrow Gue Fei Su. He only needed to move his lips and put on an emotional show. Li Hongyuan hadn't made a move against her because he needed time to cultivate his power. Only when the Empress's faction and Gue Fei Su's faction were evenly matched could he be safer, more hidden, and more time. Now, it was about time. Gue Fei Su's value had reached its end. Moreover, she shouldn't have targeted Jingwan. Therefore, Li Hongyuan naturally wouldn't feign civility with her. Although the four of them were isolated, how could such a big movement not attract the attention of others? However, this matter was related to the King of Hell. Even if they were curious, it was best not to get involved. Some things should be listened to if they could, but if they couldn't, then it was best to pretend that they didn't know anything. This was the best. Because the imperial physicians were all in the Sweet Dew Palace, Lu Qingdi was also there. On one hand, it was because of Qin Shufei. On the other hand, he wasn't in the mood to have fun with others. If he wasn't in the mood and it was cold, he naturally wouldn't come out. At this time, Gue Fei Su's people went to invite the imperial physicians, so Lu Qingdi had to be alerted. Therefore, the shadow in Lu Qingdi's heart was definitely not small. In the end, she was a woman that he had doted on for 20 to 30 years. It was impossible for Lu Qingdi to not ask. With this question, his head hurt even more. Although the person who was asked couldn't give a reason. After Old Sixth came back from Jiangnan, he had been unhappy with his mother. It seemed that they hadn't completely eased up. Now, it had escalated to another level. Therefore, if Li Hongyuan wanted to have a falling out with Gue Fei Su now, the foundation had already been set on fire. After all, Lu Qingdi himself thought so too. Call old Six to the Sweet Dew Palace, Luqingdi thought for a moment, and bring his Wang Fei along. Since Luqingdi had asked someone to invite him, Li Hongyuan still had to give face. Moreover, he wanted his old man to see him being wronged, sad, and angry. It was acting, so naturally, he had to put on a full performance. Only then would it be perfect. Moreover, some of his goals had been completely achieved. There was no need to continue staying in the palace. Taking advantage of his bad mood to leave, his old man would most likely agree. Even if Jingwan didn't feel cold, he would still feel distressed. Not long after they arrived, Luqingdi came out from the inner hall. When he saw Li Hongyuan's gloomy expression, he gave off an aura that said, "Don't get close to me." Alright, before he even asked anything, Luqingdi's heart softened. He sat down and raised his hand to Jingwan, who was greeting him, to let her rise. "What's going on now? What are you arguing with your mother?" He didn't even mind that Li Hongyuan didn't greet him. Arguing? Li Hongyuan sneered, "In father's eyes, am I a 3-year-old child? Alright, alright, alright. Then tell me, what's going on?" He was already physically and mentally exhausted, but this matter kept coming one after another. "If father wants to know, you should ask mother directly." "Why ask me?" "I don't know." Li Hongyuan seemed to be poked at his reverse scale, and his face became colder and colder. Although Li Hongyuan didn't make Luqingdi angry and often talked back to him, Luqingdi had never seen Li Hongyuan like this. At that time, Li Hongyuan was mostly arrogant and insolent. But now, under the coldness, there was anger and grievance. Luqingdi really couldn't smash things and scold Li Hongyuan like he used to. He rubbed his temples. "Alright, don't say it. I'll ask your mother later. No matter what your mother says or does, she still cares about you. Don't make too much of a fuss. Rest in Sweet Dew Palace for a while, and then go back home. Anyway, there's nothing for you to do in the palace." As for the matter of imperial concubine Su asking for an imperial physician, whether Li Hongyuan knew or not, he didn't mention it. With his son's current anger, even if he showed weakness and forced him to lower his head now, the backlash would probably be more serious. It was better to wait for his anger to subside. Therefore, Luqingdi didn't consider imperial concubine Su's feelings at all. He didn't care if she would feel better after seeing her son now. Obviously, between imperial concubine Su and Li Hongyuan, Luqingdi chose his son without hesitation. As a bystander, Jingwan emotionally wanted to clap her hands and praise Luqingdi for doing a good job. But rationally, she could only say that Luqingdi was too much of a scumbag tonight. He had already let down one person after another, and now he was rudely rubbing salt on people's wounds. And this wasn't the first time she saw Li Hongyuan's acting, but every time she saw it, she would gasp in amazement. Several people came in from outside the hall. Gong Zhou, Yu Zhongqing, and Li Suyin were among them. "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Rise." "What's the result of the investigation?" Luqingdi was still most concerned about imperial concubine Qin being poisoned. After all, this matter could also be related to his life. If he couldn't find out the truth, Luqingdi wouldn't have a moment of peace. "Replying to Your Majesty, the source of the other half of the poison has been found. It came from a sachet used by imperial concubine Shu." What was slightly different from the previous prediction was that imperial concubine Shu didn't only come into contact with this sachet once. She had been wearing it since before the banquet. The source of the sachet has also been found. Imperial concubine Shu's things all came from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Basically, she didn't let anyone buy it. The same goes for the sachet. According to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, a batch of sachets was sent to the harem yesterday. However, imperial concubine Shu wasn't the only one. All the concubines above the rank of concubine in the harem had a share. Moreover, the sachets only have different fabrics and embroidery patterns on the outside, but the fragrance inside is the same, Yu Zhongqing said. In this way, all the concubines above the rank of concubine had a share. Or rather, to confuse the public, they made such a scene to prevent the culprit from being found out quickly. However, if there was a problem with something from the Ministry of Internal Affairs, it was a very dangerous signal. After all, in the entire palace, too many things came from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. If there was a problem with one, there could be a second or third one. Therefore, Lu Qingdi's expression didn't improve at all. Your Majesty, there's no problem with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. This commoner has said before that the other half of the poison is different from the one fed to the chickens. The effect of the poison doesn't last long. Therefore, although many concubines in the harem have a sachet, Imperial concubine Shu's sachet must have been tampered with before she used it. Hearing Gong Zhou's words, Lu Qingdi finally let out a sigh of relief. Is it easy to get this poison? It's difficult. When it's made into a finished medicine, it's too toxic to be carried. If you're careless, you'll hurt yourself easily. If you're not very proficient in it, you won't dare to touch it easily. As for separating, even if you only separate one medicine, there must be another medicine in the remaining part. As the saying goes, success depends on it, and failure depends on it. There are several medicines in this poison that are hard to get. Once they're processed, they'll lose their efficacy very quickly. Putting that special medicine can prolong the efficacy of these medicines, but it won't last long. At the same time, it's also the most important component of this poison. Because it's a special poison itself, it can make a weak person have a kind of final radiance of health. However, when the effect of the medicine is over, the person will be weaker than before. The effect will last for a long time. If it's serious, it may even shorten the person's life. When I was studying medicine with my teacher, I saw this medicine once. My teacher warned me that this medicine was harmful and not beneficial, so I shouldn't use it lightly. This medicine mostly grows in the southwest near southern Qi. More than 90% of it grows on cliffs and precipices. However, according to my teacher, some people who didn't know the truth named this medicine Revival and planted it. Borrowing its special revival effect, it was once widely used by the locals. Later, when they learned of its harmful effects, it was gradually abandoned by the locals. However, I've heard of a few cases. There's no specific region, but it feels very much like it was caused by revival. From what you're saying, the medicine called Revival should have been made in the palace before the banquet, just like the other medicines that lose their efficacy easily. Your Majesty, it must be so. The advantages and disadvantages of this poison are very obvious. If used properly, its power is limitless. However, if used improperly, all previous efforts will be wasted. Lu Qingdi was relieved. Is it necessary to go to such great lengths to feed poisonous chickens? Your Majesty, there's actually a possibility that you've misunderstood one thing. Making the medicine and putting it into the chicken feed is a process of preparing the chicken feed. The chickens that can be brought into the palace should be specially raised. The process of preparing chicken feed is not simple. Adding an extra step can't be considered a great deal of trouble. The ingredients themselves are easy to obtain. The problem with the poisonous chickens can't be found, and it's easy to enter deep into the palace. The other half of the poison can be used to take advantage of the fact that the medicine disperses quickly, and it's easy to destroy the corpse and erase all traces. For example, today, if no one noticed that the poisonous chickens were easy to rot, or if I didn't happen to know something, how could I have found the source of the poison? In other people's ears, Gong Zhou sounded like he was boasting. They had to admit that he was right. Some of the ingredients for this poison were difficult to obtain, but it didn't mean that they couldn't be obtained. Once obtained, the success rate was very high. Even if they didn't succeed, it was easy to get away with it. How did that poisonous chicken get here? Have you found out? Since it was extra, it couldn't have sneaked in from outside the palace. In the palace, every main hall, side hall, and even the back hall had a small kitchen. Some concubines could always find ways to get special things for themselves. Later, it became an unspoken rule. However, those things were strictly checked when they entered the palace. The concubines also knew that they shouldn't easily accept other people's things. Basically, they lived in peace. Therefore, the imperial kitchen was not the only place where there were chickens. Your Majesty, it's clear. It said that a little eunuch of the imperial kitchen brought it in from outside. According to the words of the other people in the imperial kitchen, the eunuch even shouted that the person in charge of the chickens was so careless that he ran out. Because they were all familiar with each other, no one thought much about it. When it was traced, the little eunuch had been killed, and the clues were cut off. We didn't dare to enter the harem without permission. Luchingdi sneered, the person behind the scenes is very cunning. He was one step ahead. Even if the poisonous chicken was the real harem, it must be gone by now. And this kind of thing, Luchingdi actually didn't want to talk about his wives. That would be very shameful, and it would be even more shameful if they couldn't find out. One of Luchingdi's eunuchs hurried in, Your Majesty, someone from the Kunyi Palace came. The Empress was forced to attend the banquet. She caught a cold and her condition worsened. Now she is in a coma. Luchingdi suddenly stood up. It wasn't that he cared about the Empress. It was just that he just knew that the Empress came back to life and this happened. Everyone looked at each other. Wasn't this too much of a coincidence? But thinking carefully, the Empress seemed to be in good spirits at the banquet. Then, was it her? https://11/11807/82888208. Mobile edition. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.